let us begin. I would request Ritwik to take the chairperson's position. No, you have to basically convince Anupa that economists are, like there's an importance to the work that we are doing.
And that's not what you have to convince me. You have to convince me to stay on time.
Yeah, I don't have anything to present, by the way.
No, you don't present it, but the thing is, what Anupa is going to present are about machine learning methods that she has, we have compiled based on her discussions with us.
Okay.
But since you have more experience than us in using machine learning for economic research, we thought that you would be able to,
Okay.
better discussions, because sometimes we feel that it is going lost. Yeah.
You used machine learning too?
Yes.
For some sentiment analysis, like you have focus group discussions,
Yeah.
so then you can generate sentiments.
Yeah, so we were planning to do that, but the thing is that, we were planning to do actually much more complicated things. But yeah, I think sentiment will be something easy to measure, just whether it's a positive and a negative. So that's what we want to guide the discussion is, that what is measurable by machine learning and what machine learning, it doesn't make sense to use machine learning for. So anyway, I just download this. Did it get downloaded?
Yes.
No, there are libraries that are available. So, for example,
These are scientists, so psychologists
have prepared these libraries.
And so you were doing mostly the analysis in English.
No, ours was in Spanish. Colombian.
Thanks for again coming, and today I think what we are going to do is more like a brainstorming session, and so we have with us Dr. Anupa Sani. She is a theoretical computer scientist who's currently at ISI Kolkata doing her postdoc. Before this, she has done her PhD from Cité University. University of Paris in Paris, and she works in quantum computing, and one of her advisor, Sophie. Sorry, I'm very bad with the pronunciations. So Sophie is one of the most eminent computer scientists in this in her generation, I think. So now, today's talk is again a set of conversations that we started having with Anupa on machine learning. So it started with she giving us some customized courses based on our intellectual ability and attention spans to give courses, and she said that they are very simple. You will just finish in half an hour, and it after 2 hours she just ends up doing 2 slides. So what we have done is prepared a sort of a whatever we thought was relevant for our research, and to present to a larger audience. And the idea is that what is it that machine learning can do, which can be used in the kind of work that we are doing. Anupa, over to you, and looking forward to this very interesting and interactive session. So please feel free to ask questions that are relevant to your areas of work if you feel necessary, and if you feel that it is not at all useful to you, please feel free to also leave. I mean, there's no compulsion. So it's like a very informal session today. So there's no compulsion for you to be sitting if you feel that this is not something that would be of interest to you. Thank you.
Hello everyone. So I'm planning to do this talk on machine learning for social science, and basically what this talk is going to be is that I'm going to present to you two papers that have used machine learning in social science, and the goal of this talk is for you to understand how the various tools that are used in machine learning that can be easily applied in social science, so that you can go back and apply them in your areas of research. You can try to see your problems and the problems.
Is she audible to you, Rachna?
No.
Okay, it's not.
Hi, can you? I will use this. So, is it better now? Is it better now?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's on.
Oh, okay. Is it better now?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'll be doing this talk on machine learning for social science. Basically, what I'll be doing is I'll be covering two papers that have used machine learning for social science. And basically, it will be a very introductory session that will introduce you to what is machine learning, what are the basic, what are the tools that you can use, that machine learning has developed that you can sort of use in your problems of interest. Okay, so basically, let me start with what is machine learning. So, machine learning is this field of study in artificial intelligence that is concerned with the development and study of statistical algorithms that can learn from data and generalize to unseen data and perform tasks without explicit instructions. So there are a couple of things that I want you to take away from this. So machine learning basically is a statistical algorithm, and you're not training them with explicit instructions. The machine is exposed to a lot of data and it learns from that data on itself. Okay, and the idea is that once it learns from this data, it should be able to perform certain tasks on unseen data. So that is essentially machine learning. Now, basically you must have heard various other terms as well that are related to machine learning, and I just wanted to bring, talk about what are the distinctions between these various terms and machine learning itself. So one of those terms is artificial intelligence. And what is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence is when you mimic intelligence or behavioral patterns of humans or any other living entity. So clearly machine learning, which is this field where you try to mimic human intelligence, is a part of artificial intelligence. But artificial intelligence can be more than just that. For example, if you take robotics. Robotics is when you try to mimic the behavioral pattern of humans. And so that is part of artificial intelligence, but it's not necessarily machine learning. Okay? And then you have machine learning, which is where you let a computer learn from data without using a complex set of rules, and it is based on training from existing data. So your machine learning model is going to how good a machine learning model that you develop will strongly depend on how good your data is, because that's what you learn from. Okay, and the last thing that I wanted to talk about is data science. And data science is about discovering and communicating insights from data. So there are intersections of data science and machine learning, but there are some parts of machine learning that are not really related to data science. It's not, for instance, this is one part of machine learning which is called interpretable AI. So you want to interpret, so the machine comes up with a function, right? Or comes up with a relationship between data and some quantity of interest for you. Now you want to go back and check if this relation that it came up with is actually correct, or does it make sense for you. So that in that sense you want to interpret it. So when you want to do data science, you want to be somehow able to interpret the function that it generates. Not just that it is not, I mean, it just tells you that this is the answer. So the example that I was talking to others recently was that, you have a machine learning model, let's say, which detects whether a picture has a cat or a dog. Now, you're just interested, the machine learning model, when you give a picture, it may say it has a cat or a dog, but you're not really interested in why it said it has a cat or a dog. Now, if you use those techniques for fields like economics, where you're really interested in what made you make that decision. When you say that this one person is, not having a good wage, you really want to know why did the model say it does not have a good wage. I can't just blindly trust it. Right, so interpretable AI is very important, and that is where a lot of machine learning techniques do not have that interpretability. But then there are techniques with interpretability, and we can, and this is a goal that machine learning in general is also moving towards. Like, this is an up-and-coming area of research, interpretable AI. Okay, so then we come to this question of how can machine learning help in social sciences. So I will talk about basically the first paper that I will be discussing is this paper by Jayachandran, Biradoglu and Cooper, where machine learning is used to discover hidden patterns. So what is this paper about? So basically they have a questionnaire, a survey with 63 questions, and what they want to measure is the agency of a woman. So agency is the ability of a person to make their own, to kind of make their own decisions, that kind of construct. And they want to identify a set of questions, like the most important questions from the 63 questions that are important to understand that can determine what the agency of a person is. Okay, so it is possible that you want to study this, but you don't want to waste so much time asking 63 questions. You want to ask a smaller module of questions. Then machine learning is helping you do that. Okay, so that is one paper that I want to discuss. So the second paper is where machine learning is, I wouldn't say that machine learning is used to handle large data sets and infer patterns from it. And in this paper by Shorey, Wallach and Demery, they use machine learning to analyze about 800,000 government declassified documents to study how these declassified patterns align with various government policies. So in the US, especially, they classify a lot of documents in the interest of national security and various other interests. And because it's a very expensive, process to maintain, they periodically also declassify these documents. But there's a huge chunk of documents that are being declassified that it is essentially impossible to go through them, one by one and figure out what was the reason why this particular document was, declassified at a certain period of time. So here is where you use a tool like machine learning, which will sort of like automate the task for you to some extent. Okay. So the last paper that I will just mention, but we will not be looking at it, is how machine learning can also be used to make accurate predictions to enhance decision making. So it is this paper by Kleinberg, Lakaraju, Leskowitz, Ritwik and Banerjee, where they used ML to predict whether or not bail should be granted based on the likelihood of a person to commit a crime or fail to appear at court. And they compare, so they use machine learning to develop this model which will essentially say whether a bail should be granted by looking at previous records of people who were granted bail, who were not granted bail, and then whether they failed to appear at court, whether they went on to do another crime, that kind of stuff. And they, once they came up with this machine learning model, they also very stringently analyzed the correctness of this machine learning model. So they basically compared the bail decisions that the machine learning model makes to that made by human judges. Okay, now I'll go to what is a basic machine learning workflow. So a basic machine learning workflow is that you have an input of data. It's typically raw data. And from this raw data, the data undergoes a process called data pre-processing, where features or specific attributes of the data are extracted. Okay? So once you have these features, now you feed them into your machine learning model, which is basically an algorithm which has a bunch of parameters, and these parameters are tweaked for an input performance. So who's tweaking this? The machine model itself is tweaking it. It's not by human intervention. And lastly, the machine learning model gives you an output. So it can either be a prediction. So like the example in the previous slide that I was giving was of how you use machine learning to predict what the agency of a woman is. It can be also something like, I want to compute what the wage of a person is, given various characteristics of a person. So it can be something that you predict, like a value you predict. It can be a cluster. For instance, for declassified documents, I really wanted to identify what are the topics in these documents. So it can be a cluster, or it can be something like the detection of an anomaly. Okay, so now we go to what are the various different types of machine learning algorithms. So the first type that I wanted to first type that is most well studied is supervised learning. So in supervised learning, you try to predict or estimate an output, which is called the label of a data. Okay, and the label that you want to learn from data, it can be quantitative. For example, a question like the wage of a person is a quantitative entity, and then, or it can be categorical. So it can be a political affiliation of a person, or whether or not this person is likely to commit a crime. In that case, it's a categorical entity that you're interested in. And you do this, you want to predict this label based on the input characteristics. Okay? So the main thing about supervised learning is that you have labeled data. So you have a quantity of interest that you want to study from your data. Any questions? Just feel free to interrupt anytime. Okay. Okay. The next type of machine learning algorithms are called unsupervised learning. So in unsupervised learning, you learn patterns from unlabeled data. So here I don't really have a quantity of interest that I'm searching for. Okay, I have unlabeled data, and I really want to study what are the patterns in this unlabeled data. And here I use this technique of unsupervised learning. So here it can be, for instance, it can be understanding the patterns or topics of documents that were declassified by the government.
So how does it not give you these, like we were talking that day, sort of random words when it's doing patterns here?
So there is a, for instance, in unsupervised learning, there is a particular type of there's a question. This topic modeling is an important question, and it has been studied. And you have very good topic modeling algorithms, for instance, latent direct allocation, non-negative matrix factorization are techniques that you do specifically for, and not specifically for, but can be used for topic modeling. Right, so,
Gets rid of irrelevant words.
yeah,
It does,
yeah. I will show you how it does also. I will tell you how it does because it's very interesting. Yeah. Okay. So the next topic that we will not be going into, and this is about deep learning, where in deep learning you use artificial neural networks with multiple layers. Forget what layers are. Basically, you try to emulate the human brain. So your human brain has a lot of neural networks and is connected, and it's the kind of machine learning where you try to simulate what happens in your brain in a very, very basic sense. Okay, and deep learning uses artificial neural networks with multiple layers to learn complex patterns from data. Okay, and the last type of machine learning algorithm that I would like to say is reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning is basically an umbrella term which can encapsulate all of the terms that I talked about before. So it is this learning through trial and error, and it is often used in robotics and large language models like ChatGPTs. Okay, so I'll go to the first type of machine learning algorithm that we will describe, and it's called supervised learning. And we will look at supervised learning specifically in the context of this agency paper that I was talking about. Okay, but let me just first tell you what is supervised learning. So in supervised learning, you have a labeled data set that if you have a quantity of interest that you want to learn, and you want to, so given a labeled data set, you want to predict the output and input relation, basically. So how does it do it? This is done by analyzing the relationship between the input features and the output and the target variable in the data that you're given. Okay. So for supervised learning in particular, this is the machine learning pipeline that you have. So it has to, so you're doing a prediction, right? And you have to sort of ensure that the prediction that you do is correct. Right? There has to be checks and balances. So that is the first thing you have is data, and this data is labeled. So you have a quantity of interest that you want to study in this data. Okay? And this data is clearly labeled. This data comes in. You now divide it into two parts, a training set and a test set. Okay, a training set and a test set. So why do I do this? Is because I do the training for the machine learning algorithm on the training set. Okay, but I keep aside the test set so that once I come up with a model, I want to test it. I want to say that it's not me saying that this thing works, but it can work on data that I've not seen also. Right. So that checks and balances system is given by the test set. So once again, you have labeled data coming in. You divide it into a training set and a test set. So essentially you do an 80-20 split, which is random. So you choose 80% of your data for training set, and the remaining 20% will be your test set.
So can you go back to the labeled observation? What? The labeled observation.
Labeled observation, yeah.
So can you just give us a little brief on how the labeling is done?
Okay, so the labeled yeah.
I just wanted to know that how do we validate the training set?
Validate the training set. Okay, let me tell you that. Cross-validation is how you validate. Yeah, let me tell you that. Okay. So, okay. So, first thing is labeled observation. So, labeled observation. Let's take the example of, let's say, wage of a person. So, okay. So, I have a bunch of input characteristics for a person. It could be like what is the socio-economic, what is the social standing, what is the consumption, various other, like what is the amount of tax you pay, something like that. And then I want to identify what the wage of a person is. So initially the data that comes in has to also have what is the data, what is the wage of a person. Okay? So that is my labeled observation. Label will be the wage of a person. And I train this, it's kind of regression at this point. So using a regression, I try to understand what linear function can be used to, not linear, but like what function can be used to map the input to the output. Okay, so once I have this, so that will be my, that will be what the machine learning model comes up, and the prediction will be the function. Okay.
So this to me seems like a spreadsheet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like have different columns for
Yes.
different
Features.
characteristics.
Yeah.
What would it be in case of text?
So that will be okay. So I talked about input, right? But you have this pre-processing step where you sort of like filter out a lot of stuff and you keep the important features. So that is the data pre-processing. And I'll give you an example of how you do that for text documents later on. But for now, let's just imagine that you have a spreadsheet sort of data. You have columns and you have one column that you want to learn. That will be a label. And then you split it into training and tests. You will do your machine learning on your training set. Once you come up with a prediction, I will test it on my test set so that I can be sure that the function that I came up with is not bogus. Okay. And to answer sort of your question on how well you do on the training set, basically so the machine learning model is outputting me, giving me an output of a prediction model, right? So there is on the training set it is calculating some error. There is some error function, some cost function that it is trying to minimize. So only when it is happy with the cost function is it even going to output me this model. Right, so the training set, that must be correct on the training set is sort of like how it works with the cost function. So it might do various techniques to sort of cut down the cost. So that's the self-learning process that it does. Okay. Initially it will come with one estimate, and that estimate is going to be having a huge error. So then it comes up with another, tweaks its parameters or tweaks its coefficients a bit so that it changes Yeah. And,
Anupam.
yes.
Actually, if you permit, I want to give one example of labeling
Sure.
through remote sensing perspective.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if I want to like understand if some place has like how much content of water, how much water is there. So let's say like I went to field at one small location only. So what I do is I go there, I collect the coordinates. Okay. So that particular coordinate, it is in Excel file only, right? And that image will have some signature there. So image like how computer decides how to display the image. It is through the shades of color, right? So different shades of color, color coding will be there. So that particular code, my model will try to find in other locations also. So I labeled it first as a water, then only it was able to identify water across other places. So that is sort of labeling.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So Arthur is more of an expert on this than I am. So once you have this, so thank you so much. So once you have this prediction, now you do this the testing on your test data, and that's how you can be sure that your prediction model is actually very good. Okay, so now we go to this paper that I was talking about, which is they use machine learning to identify 5 questions that best capture a woman's agency. So what is agency? So it is a person's ability to make decisions and act on one's goals. So the problem is that it is not directly observable. But it would have been nice to know what the agency of a person is. For instance, you would be interested to know what are the relationships between agency of a person and their various other actions. Okay. So it's not a quantity that cannot be measured. Like you can measure it using semi-structured interviews, but it can be expensive and time-consuming. So you would want to identify a small set of questions that still capture agency while allowing you to, concentrate on other quantities of interest. Okay. So in this paper by Banerjee and Cooper, the authors develop a new method to select a few survey questions that can measure this latent construct. And they title this approach as MASI, which is machine learning and semi-structured interviews. So I would like to also add that similar works have also been done in a test for household poverty. But the difference is that they have used many more methods than just the one that was used for this paper by Shivsagar. Okay. So now let me say what is labeled data and input here. Okay. So in this paper, what they did was they did qualitative open-ended interviews for 210 women in Haryana, in addition to 63 close-ended questions. So they ask these close-ended 63 questions, and sometimes it might be that their answers are not directly very satisfactory for them, so they let them lead the discussion so that they can talk more about it, gave them the freedom to talk more. The reason for that is they wanted to not just from these 63 questions, but the qualitative interviewers wanted to identify what is the agency of a woman. Okay, so based on these answers that they give, the qualitative interviews and the 63 questions, they mark the agency of a woman on a scale of 1 to 4. So 1 being the one with least agency and 4 being the most. Okay, so these 63 question answers were considered as the input, and the agency that the interviewers marked is called the label. Okay, now.
So I have not looked at this data obviously, but I just want to try and understand what it might have looked like in an Excel sheet. So, so how would it be? So would it be like, there would be one column which would be the label,
Yeah.
which would be, 1 for
Yeah.
Neha, 4 for Ashmita and so on. And then where would the input be and what would it look like?
So it will be other columns.
It would be other columns.
It will be other columns, and columns will be named by the questions they asked. Like, for instance, it will be like, what were the, where you consulted in your family when they made a huge purchase.
So, and would that be one of the close-ended questions, or would that be from
Only close-ended questions.
Oh, these are only close-ended.
These are all closing.
Close-ended questions. So you consider the input, the columns of your data are just the close-ended questions. The qualitative part was just for the interviewers to be like, to have like a well-rounded measure for classifying
Yeah.
the.
So the qualitative part was used by the interviewers to give the
That's
label.
for the humans to live,
For the
labeling.
So the qualitative part was not used by the machine, or at least at this stage.
Yeah.
And the qualitative part is used by the machine learning because that, I mean, that label is what it tries to map the relation of the input, the close-ended answers from this.
But then it is through the humans, right?
So the humans label the qualitative part.
Yes.
Humans label the qualitative.
Does the machine use the quality?
And that's why it
And
is
the machine
supervised.
does not use the qualitative.
That's what I
Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's why it is supervised.
Yeah.
We supervise it.
Yeah, we supervise it and we give the label. Okay. Yeah, so the qualitative part does not go into the input data at all. It's just the close-ended information. But the reason being that, like, even without doing qualitative interviews, you know, if I mean, we want to check if these 63 close-ended questions are a good indicator, can be a good indicator for the agency performance, or like what subset of these questions are most important indicators. So basically, this model was trained on this data set of women with known agency levels that these qualitative interviewers measured, and they used it to predict the agency of new women based on their characteristics, right? Based on their answers to the 63 questions. Okay, so this problem of, you know, you're given 63 questions, you want to identify 5 most important questions from them. Okay, so that type of question, I mean, answering that type of questions is called feature selection in machine learning. So as I told you, input columns, you can imagine, they are called features. So you are given 63 features, you want to identify what are the 5 most important features. You want to select a subset of features, and this is called feature selection in machine learning. And it's basically identifying some of the most important characteristics to predict the output. Okay, so in this particular paper, they use 3 different methods and they compare the results. I mean, they basically, it's a robustness check. That they are, it's not just that one model is giving like similar answers, there's also 2 other models which are doing similarly. So the first thing that they do is called lasso stability selection. They also do random forest selection, and they also, these 2 are more machine learning models, and the last, which is backward sequencing selection, is more of a statistical model. Yeah. So lasso stability selection is one. So I was not sure if I should go in detail in this or not. So I'll just very briefly say what it is. So lasso stability selection is a kind of like linear regression you do. But in the linear regression, you basically come up with an input function that maps your input data to your output. So it's a linear function, it's going to have coefficients and multiplied with variables, right? What lasso does is, it is going to also ensure that, if some coefficients are not important, it will shrink it to 0. Okay, so that, in that way, it will help you find those coefficients that, survive, and those coefficients are important for determining the output.
So how is it different from principal component?
Principal component is more about variance, right? Like you want to capture which, what are the features in your data that contribute to the most variance. Okay. This is not quite that. Like in the sense that this is about, you have this, it's like mathematically it's kind of different. I don't know exactly if, essentially they end up doing the same thing. I get what you mean in the sense that PCA is also, principal component analysis is a dimensionality reduction technique. And this is also kind of dimensionality reduction. So in that way it's similar, but mathematically it's kind of different.
What? Here out of 10 variables you retain only 5.
Yeah, 63.
Yeah, whatever.
I think 10 and 2 5 is
I'm saying that you have n number of variables, you reduce it to n minus k, right? So that's what this does. Principal component analysis doesn't do that. It tries to identify whether a underlying latent factor explains the variables that you have. So you have 10 variables. Is there one latent factor which
Yeah.
can capture?
But I understand why she means that, because like it's the one latent factor is a combination, it's a linear combination of other latent factors, other factors. So in a sense, it is doing some dimensionality reduction.
It is doing dimensionality reduction, it is trying to find one common
Yeah,
factor,
true,
right?
true.
But
I agree.
here,
Yeah.
these 5 variables can be of very different types.
Yes.
So very fundamentally, there are different types of dimensions.
So in this case, what we are trying to do is we're just trying to remove the variables that do not explain our main question in mind. Is that what we're doing? So
Yeah.
we're just removing variables, whereas
I think that
PCA
is-
we are trying to find
They
a
are similar.
Right.
But exactly.
A linear curve.
Yeah.
I also want to understand the mathematical
Yeah. Underpinnings.
underpinnings of this principal component analysis, which I'm
Yeah. I mean, I
fully understand.
kind of get what you mean. I do get what you mean, and I think that they are similar, but I have to look at it. I cannot. Mathematically, I can think about it because principal component analysis is also giving you some linear, combination of latent factors. One, but some combination.
I think it's very different because you see here, so look at this selection technique. So let's say age, gender, income, and a bunch of other demographic variables are there, right? So there are 63 demographic variables. You want to select 5 which best fits the Y. So you end up having a gender, you'll end up having income, but maybe not age. Right? So you'll end up having a subset of variables out of that 63. That's what this does. Right? Now, gender, age, income, is there a common underlying factor? No. Where do we use principal component analysis? Let's say you have a battery of 10 questions, right? A battery of 10 questions, which is, do you agree with this view, right? So women should go out to work. People should have the right to religious freedom, and a bunch of these questions, right? And then you use principal component analysis to see whether there is an underlying factor that explains the variation in these 10 questions, which are in a very different scale. One important criteria of principal component analysis is that they have to be on a similar scale, on the same scale. Disagree to agree. So a bunch of 10 questions reported on disagree to agree can be reduced in terms of dimension.
So here
It's age, gender, income, these all have different ranges, right?
So this sort of to me sounds like we are doing a regression when we throw in all these different variables, and whatever coefficient is not significant, you are dropping. Is that something like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So, here you have the feature selection is much more easy. Like you have 5 questions, then you can look for the 5 most important coefficients. It's not that easy, I guess, in dimensionality reduction to narrow down.
This is also dimensionality reduction, but with a different purpose.
Yeah.
The purpose is different.
Purposes. Okay, so the next technique that they use is called random forest selection. So basically it's based on something called decision trees. So decision trees are essentially you have a question on top of these tree nodes or vertices. You ask something like, is the age greater than 30? If it is, answer is yes, I go to the left. If the answer is no, I go to the right. And then I ask, on the node, there might be a different question. It might be, is the person employed in a salaried sector or is it self-employed? Then based on that, I go on to the next one until I reach the leaf node where it will have an answer. Like wages, say 10,500. So it's not. So what you do is not just a decision tree. You make use of a combination of decision trees. Like here in this particular case, they take 100 decision trees and we take an average of all their answers, and that is what you consider as the answer for your model. So what they do here in this random forest selection is that they look at how important a particular variable is for the trees that you have selected. Like you have a 100 select 100 sort of trees that forests that you're looking at, and you look at how important are the variables, each of these variables in the decisions that you make for finding the correct answer, and that's how they narrow down their number of variables. And the last one that they use is called backward selection, sequential selection, where they do this, they iteratively remove the least important variables until only 5 variables are left. Okay, so this is what is done in this paper. Okay, so there's also one more technique that I wanted to say that is used in machine learning, and it's called cross-validation. So, as I said,
Sorry, can I just go back to the previous one? So in that lasso selection, the backward sequential you keep dropping,
yes,
right? But in this lasso, how does it shrink the coefficients to 0?
So basically, so imagine a regular regression cost function. So you have like some alphas xi, and then you take what is the, so you have like summation yi, not yi. Then we take alpha xi as the output function, minus I take what is the actual label yi, let's say. Yeah, and that will be the cost of the difference. I mean the cost of my predicted value versus the actual value. That would be a regression. But in addition, you also penalize high coefficients. So you put a penalized, so the cost function is not just this error, but you also put plus modulo, absolute value of lambda i's, summation of lambda i's. So to reduce this cost, you also now reduce the coefficients values. So when you actively make it reduce coefficients, it is going to drop it to 0. Okay, so then you have this, there is also this technique, not technique, is basically very underlying principle of machine learning, which is that they use cross-validation. So basically a machine learning model that you have, you can choose different machine learning models, as you've seen. You could choose random forest, you could choose, lasso, but then there are also various parameters of the model itself that you need to find out. Okay, so these parameters, for instance, is for the lasso is a shrinking parameter. So I can choose to put an extra additional lambda factor for how important the shrinking is to me. Okay, so the machine learning model, in addition to coming up with these coefficients, also has to figure out what the shrinking coefficient should be. And for the random forest, it could be the number of forests that I should consider as well. So to figure out these parameters, it does this method of cross-validation. So what is cross-validation? It takes this data and it splits it. So this is what you do in the beginning. You take the data, split it into a training set and a test set. And within the training set itself, so test set you do not touch. That is the holy, you do not touch. Training set, you can now divide it into, here it will be divided into 3 parts. Okay? And for the first run of this algorithm, they're going to take the first 2 parts to be the training part and the last part to be the validation part. Okay? And they look at what is the performance on the validation part when you train it on the first 2 parts. You also run it on the second, you run it again, with the first and the third being your training parts, second being your validation part, and then again with the first being your validation part and the last 2 being your training part. So you get 3 performance indicators, average them, and that will be your performance for this particular choice of parameter. If you're not satisfied, you modify your parameter, see how your performance is changing. Okay, so that's how it learns the parameters of the model also. Okay, now we go to this unsupervised learning technique. Okay, so for this unsupervised learning technique, the one algorithm that I'll be focusing on is topic modeling. And it's about how topic modeling is used for this other paper of declassifying documents that I talked about. So this paper by Shorey-Wallach and Demery analyzes a large corpus of declassified documents in the US to help with policy decisions. So this classification and declassifying of documents is a policy decision, right? Like you want to identify, like it's a it's a entity of interest to both the government and for the people. So how is the government interested? It's because maintaining these large documents that are to be classified is an expensive affair. Like they need to actually put aside manpower to do this. So choosing which documents to declassify and when is an entity of interest to the government. And it's also interesting for the people because you want to understand why certain classified documents were declassified at a particular instance of time. Like what changed? What policy decisions? Maybe related to government policies of foreign trade. It could be related to government transparency. But you also want to know like what topics were declassified where. Okay. So this I will not spend much time on this, but I would like to say what they do. So what do they do here? They combine both the temporal and content information. What I mean by that is, sorry, let me just get some water. Okay, so it combines both temporal and content information. What I mean by temporal information is time-related information in a document. Like you want to understand at what time was certain documents, published and their relation to when it was declassified. And the second one you want to analyze is you want to find out is what is the topic of the documents that were declassified. Right. So this is what you want to do. Now I'll just focus on the content part. Like how do they identify the content topics in a document? So they use various natural language processing methods such as TF-IDF. So TF-IDF is a term frequency inverse document frequency, and it's very interesting. So now imagine you have a document and you want to identify what the topic of a document is, but you can do it multiple ways. Like you can actually understand the meaning of the document itself and then try to identify, okay, what is the topic. But you could also just, what if I feed it to a machine who doesn't need to necessarily understand the meaning of the document itself, but still gives me what the topic is. Okay, so one indicator for a topic of a document is, it can be a word that repeats multiple times within the document. That is a good indicator, right? But there is an obvious problem, okay? Because like words like is, the, is going to be repeated multiple times, but they don't really contain any information with regard to the topic of the document. So you need to sort of like remove those words. So this is what TF-IDF does. So term frequency basically looks at all the words within a document and counts what are the number of times they occur within the document. Okay, so this is a factor they consider. The second factor they consider is the inverse document frequency. So inverse document frequency basically calculates this value. So it looks at how many, it's a fraction basically. So the numerator is what are the total number of documents within this corpus that you're looking at, and it divides by what are the number of documents in which this word appears within this corpus. Okay, so it looks at total number of documents in the corpus divided by total number of documents in which this word appears.
So what is the corpus here? So
80,000 documents.
Sorry?
80,000 documents.
The 80,000 documents.
All of the inputs. Okay. So
what's on the numerator again?
Total number of documents.
So that's on the
Total number of documents that have this word, a particular word you're looking for. You calculate this for each word.
Yeah.
So first you calculate what is the term frequency, which is the total number of, in a document, how many times does this word appear. And then you also consider the inverse document frequency, which is I'm not fully done with inverse document frequency. So inverse document frequency, take this fraction, which is the total number of documents in the corpus divided by number of documents where this word appears, and you take the log of this. Okay, so listen. So you want this to be like a small enough.
because you're taking the log.
It's because you're taking the log. You want it to be a value that is greater than or equal to 1.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't want it to be between 0 and 1. Yeah, okay. So then basically what you have is that, so if you have a word like or the or is, it's going to appear in every word. So this thing that I talked to you about, inverse document frequency, it's going to be log of 1, which is 0.
Yeah.
So when you take the when you take the significance of the word to be the product of the inverse term, inverse document frequency times the term frequency, it's going to be weighted accordingly. Okay, so that is how you do it, even when you don't know the meaning of the words. Okay, then they also do, so this is basically identifying what are the important words, but in addition they also have to do like topic modeling. They sort of like to identify many different words, many different documents may fall into one particular topic, and its topic modeling is kind of different. It's not just, this is just one part of it. So then you perform models, methods such as in this paper, latent direct allocation. Yeah, I think that's it. So that's it.
Do you know anything about this latent directly?
So it's again, you do this multiple times. You do this thing. You allocate a topic to a particular document, and then you do this repeatedly. You say, okay, I started with one allocation. Is this the best allocation? Then I do it again. Like there is some cost minimization that it's like you come up with one function, but random function of allocation of topics to documents. Then you try to like skim and go through it and try to reduce error.
Yeah, I can ask that. I'll ask.
So in this TF-IDF,
Yeah.
does it determine the words itself, or do you have to tell it which words?
No, it just determines the words.
It determines it.
The words are all the words in your document, right? So it can separate.
Yeah. So if we were doing our interviews in this way,
Yeah.
that's it would be able to see which words are coming up most frequently, how many interviews they're coming up
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, but there's a slight linguistic complication, which is that it tries to capture maybe the morphemes of a word, in the sense that if you have a word like universities, all of them should be similar. So that kind of nuance should be captured.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's right.
but other than that, it should be fairly
Okay.
So it is possible to use these techniques on qualitative data, no?
Yeah.
And why should it be a problem to use it in Hindi?
It shouldn't be a problem for these things.
For at least the term frequency and
Yeah,
term
this
frequency.
can be used on qualitative data, but in qualitative data, if you're planning to measure a specific aspect that you are interested in, these techniques might not capture it.
Yeah, so
That's what.
yeah, like if you want to understand the meaning of what they're saying, in some sense, that is not something that is captured here. This is just topics.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's say, for example, we're trying to understand prestige, right?
Yeah, that is again a meaning question. Like if they talk about prestige, you can capture that. Or various other topics that they talk about in the context of prestige, you can talk about that. Like if you want to identify, when somebody talks about prestige, what are the most words that are most likely to show up?
Yes.
That can be captured.
Yeah. But so long as we know which words are coming up most frequently, then the interpretation can be done by us or by comparing to a dictionary
but
or
then-
whatever.
Only if you're trying to test one thing, but if you're trying to test multiple things, that would be a.
Like what do you mean if I'm trying to test what you say?
So if you're trying to test autonomy, you're trying to test prestige, you're trying to test.
Then
like-
context would matter, right? Like
Yeah.
I talked about prestige in this context, but then in autonomy, it's the
Ah.
entire document that you're giving me.
Right, so if I have a question on prestige, I can do it, and I have a question on autonomy, then I can do it. But if both prestige and autonomy are running through the theme,
But should it not pick it up? I mean, I'm
It
a
would
bit
pick it up.
confused at this point
It would
because
pick it up, but then there will be a lot of intersections that you would have to resolve.
that's fine. And that's for us as researchers to do. But it will just throw up what are the most common words that are turning up. And it might turn out, sorry, just to go back to what we were saying before this session started, that it will throw up the words that we were thinking about as being most important, or it might not.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, we'll have to use a bit of imagination to see that it wasn't some morphemes that were being left out. But if it does, then we know the frequency with which those words came up and so how important they happen to be.
So in our context, would it then make sense that when we do the FGDs, just for the FGD, the data that we get from the FGD, we use natural language processing, and then based on the outputs that we get from this natural language processing, we use those outputs for our like the broader interview and do structured.
Yeah, I agree with that, but there's one thing that I wanted to say, which is that there is this problem of interpretability that can come up. So these techniques are interpretable, like it's giving you what the topics are. But the interpretability question comes up a bit more when I feel like you're asking this open-ended question. They're talking about various things, right? But if I want to measure particularly what prestige is, or if I want to measure what is autonomy, then it might not be so easy to do this.
No, so FGDs we're not using to measure these.
Yeah.
We're
And
just
then it's fine.
using to get words that we are going to use for
That
the
we
bigger
want to
interview.
ask questions.
And
Then
the
that
measuring
is
will come.
completely
That's
fine.
right.
What I don't want to do is just this, that you listen to qualitative interviews and come up with an answer.
No.
Then it's fine.
No.
Yeah.
It can be the base work of more structural study, but it cannot be the study itself.
No,
Yes,
because
yes.
then we have the interviews which will be the more structured.
Yes.
Then that's fine.
Yeah, but then what my understanding is that it would have problems in like coming up, clustering words, which if we are testing multiple different concepts, if we are testing something simpler, and I think Ritwik, what is your thought about it? For example, you use this LLM for qualitative data.
Yeah.
So
I will share some of what I have done.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
might be
yeah.
helpful.
But
I'm done.
she's done.
Actually, before you start, does anyone else have any questions
Yeah,
for
sorry.
Yes, because
Yeah, why don't you come forward, or like free to leave if you are like really exhausted.
no, but
Yeah.
you can stay as well.
Yeah. This was the last question. Another point that I think is, again, like whether we should use, would it be better if one person is goes through, like, you're doing 30 interviews, what machine will you come up with? So would it be better if somebody was
Human being, yes.
Yeah, if this human being is posting, machine might miss out on it.
So might as well human being.
Yeah, I always do both.
Yeah, that is fine.
And then we also
Since we are a JNU majority, unlike in the last conference where there was an ISI majority, I'm taking this liberty to sort of JNU-fy your ISI presentation.
Standard with slogans, is that
the machine will learn which slogan to give.
So if group allows, like the discussion about this AI and machine learning, and you talked about the JNU thing also. So our one of the co-founder, Aditya sir, he's from also like JNU, and he has completed MC and all. He has designed a very good M&E system in iSection. So we are also using this AI and machine learning for our work. That is also recognized in Times of India also. our डेटा जो बडी टॉक क्लासरूम ऑब्जर्वेशन और बाकी चीज़ों में निकल के आ रहा है, वी हैव अ लार्ज सेट ऑफ डेटा दैट जनरेटिंग एवरी मंथ. तो उस एआई और मशीन लर्निंग से हम कैसे उससे अपने लिए डेटा जनरेट करके उस पर समझ बना रहे हैं. आई कैन ऑल्सो टॉक अबाउट दैट थिंग ऑल्सो.
Like I I use ChatGPT as my assistant for everything that I do. So, for example, what kind of question should I ask? This is the first thing I would ask to ChatGPT. I don't use ChatGPT, I use another one called Claude, which is, I find, yeah, all the same.
Is it free or not?
No, none of this. You can't use any of this advanced feature for free. So this is a simulated discussion. So the name of this person is Sumita. ChatGPT has given. So what you can do is you can thank you. From the text that you have generated, can you determine on a scale of 1 to 10 how much agency Sunita has? By agency, I mean just give me right. So the moment you give something like this, based on the dialogue, Sumita's agency is 6 out of 10. So, as Anupa said, if they have a bunch of these 63 questions, and this is by Seema Jayachandran's side, that's what you were describing. But we now have technology which can get rid of the entire process, and you can get these large language models to generate these scores which satisfy stability and a bunch of other desired characteristics. If you throw in some seeds, I'm not an expert, so feel free to jump in. Yes.
For me, this is the problem with interpretation. I mean, so the ChatGPT is telling me 6 as a score, but on what ground?
On what ground? That's a very important question, but I'll show you on what ground.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's an absolutely very important question. First order question, that how much should we believe in the score of 6? Right? So that's absolutely. But I'm saying that this is possible. It is possible to get rid of all the underbellies and the codes that need to be written, the difficulties, etc. But just throw in the text to an LLM, and LLM will give you a score. Okay, so now what did we do?
Sorry, so you mean ChatGPT is using LLM?
The ChatGPT is an
It's
LLM.
LLM based.
Okay.
ChatGPT, the underlying structure.
Structures.
Large language.
Okay.
So what we did was we conducted an experiment in Colombia, and there was a purpose to the experiment. It was trying to understand how affirmative action for women increase effort in the effort in job application, right? So there's a 7-page job application. How much effort does a woman put in? Our hypothesis was if you throw in affirmative action policies, then the effort itself goes up. So that was the idea. But what I wanted to show you was, as part of this job application process, there was something called a motivation letter. We read SOPs all the time. We write recommendation letters all the time. So it's a large text. The data comes in the form of a large text. Now, think of some of the qualities that you would want in a potential applicant. You would want the person to be hardworking. You would want the person to be enthusiastic about the work, right? Have a sense of ikigai in the morning, and all of that, right? So, is there a way we can read the motivation letter and come up with the kind of sentiment that the person brings to the table? So that's the first exercise we wanted to do. Now, if you see this, these are Spanish quotes from these motivational letters. So there are words like falta. Falta means lack, right? And there are words like entusiasta. Entusiasta is enthusiastic. So now you have these texts, and you can assign what kind of sentiments these texts reveal through a valence, arousal, dominance framework. So it's a framework that psychologists have come up with. And you've seen this, by the way. This is exactly from the previous presentation.
That's what we could do in this session.
It's just this chat. So valence, arousal, dominance is a framework that psychologists have come up with. And valence talks about pleasantness of a word. So for example, content, happy, these are all high valence words. Sad, nervous, these are all low valence words. Right? Arousal is the intensity of emotion. Extremely happy is very different from I'm glad. So arousal measures intensity. So tired, calm, these are all low arousal words, but excited. So now each word can be located in a two-dimensional scale, one dimension being valence, the other being arousal. So you now have this. Right, and where do we get these valence values and arousal values from? We get it from this library that has been generated by the psychologists. So now you see enthusiasta appears in the northeast quadrant, but lack appears in the southwest quadrant.
So this library is in English. And
It's an English library, yes, for 2000 English lemmas, but there is a version of this in Spanish. So we use the Spanish library. The other option is to translate the whole thing and then use the English language. So then you can plot it here. And then you can throw in dominance as well, which generates a sense of control. So a leader, mighty, these are all high dominance words. Follow, soft, these are all low dominance words. So now you have a three-dimensional space where you can locate each word.
just to interrupt
Yeah.
you, this going to the earlier slide. So these three factors that you list to measure sort of the emotion, where does this come from?
Which one?
Valence, arousal, dominance. Psychology literature.
Yeah, there's a psychology literature which talks about valence, arousal, dominance. It's a long literature. It's a literature that is quite old and rich. But what these guys did was they created this library where words could be mapped to a valence score. So we're taking that library and we are using whatever word is available there. We are assigning them a score on a VAT frame.
So will it do it for every word that is there in the...
Yeah, there could be some words which are not there in this library, so they are unscoped.
Yeah, so for example, if someone has to do this exercise now, they will be able to do this sentiment analysis by mapping the words in the interview with this thing.
Yes, but you don't, you have LLM. You don't need to do this exercise anymore.
I've heard,
Let me come back to your scrutiny. Your scrutiny is absolutely important. You don't want everything to be replaced by LLM. But I'll show you what LLM does.
Okay, just to put it deeper. So what you're doing is every word in every document is scored according to this. And then what are you doing? Are you doing a summation of all scores or an average of all scores?
No, this is this 3D space. Each dot on this 3D space is characterized by three coordinates. 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
Valence, arousal, dominance.
Yeah.
So you have a score of valence.
So each dot is a word.
Each dot is a word.
Each document, so my interview or my CV or whatever you're looking, has say 7,000 words.
Right.
So each 7,000 words will have a score in this space.
That's right. Yes.
And then how do I compare?
You can
then
take an
the-
average.
Then
You
get
take an
an average. And then say I have an average value for my
What is the
document,
balance
and-
expressed in this statement of purpose?
Yes.
Balance expressed is this.
Sorry, I have a question. It's maybe a very basic question, but what defines lack? That dot point should be like in the maybe a coordinate of 0.5 and somewhere around that.
Yeah.
But then why it is not near to the origin and far from the origin?
I don't know how. Yeah, it's I don't know which one is lack.
The above, the first,
Above one, first.
The purple one.
not the 3D one, the 2D one.
Is the one.
0 to 0. 0 to 10, 0 to 10.
But like, what defines the coordinates? Like it's like far from the origin, then the other one is like. So
If the balance is low, like so lack is a low balance, so it should be closest low. It's also low arousal. I mean, fault is
but
a
like
low.
how low?
Ah,
That's
so
the.
that is what we have done.
That comes from the library.
And I'm guessing this library is not updated with changes in language. For example, sick for young people means,
So this library.
awesome.
No, no,
And
it
sick
could-
for old
So
people
I'm not
means.
entirely sure if it will be like a, there is some amount of machine learning surely that is also going into the library as well. In the sense that the way I see it at least is it's not that one person is hand coding it. That you're looking at this, but it's also.
But is this not hand coded?
It is handy.
This is hand coded, but the modern ones
Yeah, I mean,
are contemporary.
That's why
ones
you can
are
get
not
rid of
hand
all
coded.
of these and come to LLM.
Yeah, yeah.
no, wait.
This is
It
us
doesn't
trying to
have to
understand,
be.
okay,
No,
yeah.
the thing about it doesn't have like NLP as a literature. I mean, as a study has been very extensively and well thought out body of work. And sentiment analysis is something that you have very prominent computer scientists working within India as well. Very well studied topic. So there, when you think about these things, like you don't really have to think about like how do I say? I mean, I'm trying to think about. So it's similar to how Google, for instance, would do something like analyzing which pages to bring to the fore. So it's not actually going and looking at every if you type some word, let's say, it's not trying to bring up every document without any order. It's trying to identify which are the most important documents that you have to bring. So that it is going through by having this library of websites that it keeps track of, but it also tries to do a ranking procedure. Similar ranking procedure can also be done for words based on how they appear in documents. And I'm sure that NLP uses one of those things.
Yeah. And then there are all these problems with that because internet is very racist. So
Yeah, I mean, NLP,
NLP here, those problems
they're
are
not there. So sentiment analysis is one place where you can
Hand-coded.
think that
no, here this is hand coded, so this obviously that doesn't have the problem. But what
This is
Anupa
NLP.
is saying, no, but what Anupa is saying, so here this is hand coded, so this is like a dictionary that someone.
But NLP literature, to my understanding, was hand-coded initially.
initially, yes.
Yeah,
Initially that was your only thing that you could do. But I'm pretty sure, I mean, I have to check again. But I'm pretty sure that that is not how it would have evolved. I mean, it's not like you had NLP which hand-coded it and immediately jumped to LLMs.
I'm sure it's a continuum.
Yeah, so like I'm sure that there is a procedure where there is a structural study and then maybe got hijacked.
I mean, maybe we can see what you've done with this. and-
Okay, yeah.
So one question that I wanted to say was for sentiment analysis, I don't think that fairness and bias, especially when it comes to different parts of the world, is not really a question that is very relevant for sentiment analysis. Everybody expresses happiness in pretty much the same way.
No, her point is different. Her point is the context in which language is used is often different. For example, I remember after Pujo, we went for Vijaya to a friend's place, and his mother gave us a bowl of ghugni, and we loved it, and we said, "Nongra hoyeche." right? So the Nomra is dirty, right? But it's a very colloquial college lingo,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
right.
And
So
but
this
to
is
be
what you
honest,
said.
I had both these questions. Both were questions.
So far as this is concerned,
Yeah.
so this is where an experiment comes in. I'm a big evangelist of experiments, right? Not just RCTs, but experiments in general. So think of, as long as your treatment condition is not correlated with the use of such words, you are fine in identifying a treatment effect that is unbiased. So if you think that the word sick is differently used in different treatments, then you have a problem. But if you think that this word sick is similarly used, independent of which treatment you are in, right? So then you're fine.
Yeah, but then
And all of these techniques inevitably will have measurement errors,
Yeah.
large measurement errors. But if you're doing an experiment, you don't care, because all these measurement errors, if they're uncorrelated with the treatment, there are theoretical reasons to believe that these measurement errors are correlated with the treatment, then you have a problem. But otherwise, you are sort of safe.
Just to say one thing, so I'm pretty sure that maybe they have these hand-coded hand-coded libraries in the beginning, but then they would have evolved. I mean, that's what I assume maybe evolved into giving scores based on the context in which the word has been appeared. I mean, whether if it's a formal context, then sick means something, and if it's an informal context, then it means something else. And likewise, similar words could also have different numerical values associated to them based on the context in which it appears.
LLMs can do that, I'm sure.
LLMs, but I'm sure that this is also true for NLPs. So yeah, I'm sure it's in a sense, but but what I mean to say is that I think
LLM is large language models and NLP is
natural language processing. So any is a natural language processing tool. So what I mean to say is that there should be some rigor in how you, it cannot be that LLM is telling me this is the answer and I believe it. That is just
No, of
not.
course not.
That cannot be, so this is the problem with questions like agency, which I believe is a more, it cannot be that agency that is measured in India is similar to the agency that is measured in the US. And you mean like a large language model which is trained in the
Oh, I've mentioned it. It has come up with Sunita. So
but
it
what if the bias is that it assumes every Indian lady is
Of
some...
course, we need to be
Yeah,
careful.
not is called Sunita,
Yeah,
but like,
absolutely. It has these
No, but
features.
then,
Yes.
has these very rural...
The point
that's a
she is
very-
making is, and
Yeah.
what is Uma's point is that
It's a prejudice.
we should we want to find something which we don't know.
Right.
And then what we don't know, how do we check that
Yeah.
this is
So
like,
if it is
is it-
perpetuating prejudice of the, of the US, of the American idea that Indian women are supposed to be
I'll-
slumdog millionaire characters, then I don't believe
I'll fall back to exactly what I said earlier, which is there will be measurement errors, but this is what you're saying is an example of measurement error, right?
it's bias.
No, that's a bias because measurement error is supposed to be like white noise.
No, okay, so
Yeah.
it's a bias, but
Yeah.
it's a bias that is uncorrelated. Measurement error is a much broader term. It's a bias that is uncorrelated with the treatment. So as long as you're trying to identify a causal effect through a treatment condition, then I'm absolutely sure that number 6 is intrinsically meaningless. But if a treatment condition, right, changes the number 6 to number 4, then you can interpret the difference. And I'm not saying that you should interpret the quantity of the difference. You don't need to interpret the quantity of the difference. That's a direction.
okay, so can we test this? Like,
That we're testing it. Yeah, we're exactly doing that. We're testing it.
Okay, so this was one thing that used to come up with, like in earlier days, very early days of machine learning, for theorists in particular, were very the problems of fairness in machine learning and bias in machine learning and racial inequalities in machine learning is not something that people looked up 2 years back. It's something that people have been looking it up from like 15 years back, and very well studied from just advocating for the large scale, application of these methods before these issues are resolved. And that is a concern. That is a huge concern. You cannot, you should not.
But you can use it and still use
Human.
researcher.
Yeah.
So that's why I talk about interpretable AI. Like you say.
Yeah, and that's fine.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean we can't use it. I mean,
No,
it's
I
like
think
any
you can-
regression,
no, but
right?
you can
I think they have
interpret it.
done something similar,
No,
right?
no, no, no.
So
You interpret using interpretable AI, you can easily understand whether the system itself has biases that is creeped in. Whereas if I come up with an agency score of 6 and does not tell me anything about
No, but I mean, we are researchers, right? We are never going to use, it says 6, we are not going to sit and say this is 6, right? We will have
No, but even
ensured
if-
that we test it.
let's look at
Yeah.
this graph. I remember that there was a graph where humans have scored the sentiment.
So-
sentiment analysis is a different question for me. That does not have like a lot of inequality in the definition of sentiment itself. Agency is a very context dependent.
Absolutely. I don't think we can use that in our
Yeah,
context
that-
quite
So
honestly.
Yeah.
that's why I'm
But
saying,
I want to see
I'm
what
not
is possible.
saying- I'm not
Just
saying
want to see
that.
what is possible.
I'm not saying that it should not be used. It should be used in areas like sentiment analysis where it has been studied
That's
for a
what we
long
try to do. So, sorry, we'll talk later.
So Anupa is the dreaded R2. You know R2?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So then,
Beauty, by the way. But I want to see what is.
I would not scared of me.
so what we wanted to do was we wanted to understand how the sentiment expressed in motivational letters varied with the affirmative action conditions, right? So that's this, and you can easily see here that women, in the absence of affirmative action policies, they express lower sentiments in these motivational letters, and these are large numbers, like 800 motivational letters. So in the absence of affirmative action, low motivation. In the presence of affirmative action, you can see there's a significant increase in. The increase is not in dominance, but the increase is detected in balance and arousal. So now you have you're coding sentiments and you're seeing what the treatment effect on that sentiment is. Right? So I would have much more faith in the treatment difference, not in the absolute levels of.
So, just to go back to the point that was being made, which is about the bias, you did this in Colombia, okay, where this balance is expressed in different ways, and now you do the same thing, 800 questions in Norway. So what you're saying to us is that the magnitude of this effect might be different, but you would still believe in, once you've done the affirmative action, the treatment, the difference, that change, even if you don't believe in the number of the change, the direction of the change, you would be.
So there is a big literature, you see experiments have, particularly lab experiments, where there was a heyday of lab experiments, and then suddenly field experiments started gaining a lot of prominence. But of course field experiments is expensive, so field experimenters started questioning the external validity of lab experiments in a big way. So the external validity was the Achilles heels of any paper. You can basically, you have that heel and you just hammer that heel and the paper is dead, right? So then these lab experimenters started thinking, what can we do to retrieve or bring back credibility to lab experiments? Because you see, multiple Nobel Prizes have been won on principles that have been discovered through lab experiments. Prospect theory, for example. Now they said that look, we have to, and of course it's true that the quantitative changes are not externally valid, right? You have large quantitative. So they conducted a series of studies and they showed that in lab experiments, the qualitative change of treatment is externally valid, but quantitative. So labor economists are interested in what? 1% change in education changes the wages by 3.5%, right? They care about the 3.5%. But lab experimenters or small experiments which are small in scale, you don't want to put too much faith on this percentage change. You want to put a lot of faith in the correlation. So, but that's one part. Now, but what do we do with these sentiment ratings? Why should we care about it? At the end of the day, we don't care about sentiments. We care about whether the application is good or not, right? So, suppose I express dominant sentiment, but my application, the application is overall, the entire thing doesn't read well. So, I'm not an attractive candidate. I can, so for example, if you see a statement of purpose, and I'm extremely enthusiastic about all that I do, I love doing this, I love doing that, so then you will sort of sit back and say, oh no, this is not what I want. I don't want too enthusiastic. So what we care about are these metrics. The candidate is ideal for the job. We care about this. To what extent do you agree? On a scale of, let's say, 1 to 6. The candidate is highly motivated. The candidate is this. The candidate has necessary experience. The candidate will contribute positively to all of these things we care about. Right? Now, there are 800 SOPs and there are 5 characteristics. So, you have to figure out a way to assess the scores for each of these 5 metrics. What we then did was we got these SOPs rated by human RAs. All 800. Right? And this is what the ratings look like. Can you see?
When we do job market, when we are searching for recruitment, that's the kind of spreadsheet we use.
LLM. Outsource it to LLM.
I think we should, because we often get like 300 applications,
Exactly.
and it's hell.
Yeah. And
There's a lot of good ones.
yeah. So we love Excels, right? So I put that Excel right now, so you have a good sense of what is going on. So you see, these are the 6 enumerators. These are the enumerators. Name 1 to name 6. So each enumerator rated about, there are 13 enumerators in all. So each of them rated the 5 questions. So this is the 5th question. P5-6 is the 5th question that is being rated by the 6th enumerator. Right? So, so now you have these 5 questions, and this is the average rating of all the 6 enumerators for P1, average rating for P2, and so on. And this is your favorite principal component. So now we have a reason to find whether there is a latent factor that explains the variation in these, right, in P1. So this is the average and this is the principal component. And they co-move. So we are on fine. And this is the motivation letter. This is a motivation letter. Or these are motivation letters.
So sorry, are these enumerators, they are giving these grades based on the motivation letter or the CV?
No,
Just
motivation.
the motivation.
Just
That's
the
your
exercise.
data.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so yes, I just wanted to confirm that there aren't two data
Other
sets.
information.
That
Yes,
cannot
I
be, right? Then we cannot validate.
And the number beside the motivation letter is
That's module.
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
Okay, fine.
Wouldn't that have made more sense? So if what I was saying before, so the enumerators use a different information set for the same candidate to rank the candidate, so say the CV, and the machine uses.
It depends on the question you're
Yeah,
trying
it's
to
a
ask.
question.
It's a different question. So then what we did was, then we gave the same data to to ChatGPT, GPT-4. And so this is what a prompt looks like. You have to
It's so specific.
you have to tinker with the prompt a lot. So for example, to address a concern that Orupa had, you can say that make sure you don't have biases. I know that you're trained in, you can really speak like a human. You can tell them that I know you're trained in US data, but make sure that you don't have biases. Of course biases can emerge. That's a different question. But you can throw these things in.
But it can be a US idea of India, which is what I do.
Of course.
Yeah, let's just hear what. I think there will be fundamental disagreements. I can't say I totally agree with him either, but we still need to hear what he's saying, right?
So yeah, so this is what we can take a quick look at it, and what you can see is the important thing is the thing in red. So those are the five characters, and it's exactly the same thing that the human is.
I see. So you're asking it to evaluate for each of these five.
For each of these five, and what this code will do.
Okay, so sorry to interrupt. Here, when we are giving this prompt, this is sort of the training that we are providing the model.
No.
Can we-
The model already has something. The GPT-4 is a trained
It's
model.
a very well trained.
It's trained with 3 trillion, many trillions of, neural neurons. Giant.
I'm just taking a photo of this.
So here, when you use a large language model, you are not doing anything.
So can, here that's what I'm asking, like, can we give some, can we just write down that this is my, this is what an ideal candidate for me
You can
would,
do that. Yeah, absolutely you can. So that's the thing about LLMs. You can write a prompt that is quite long and you can describe what an ideal candidate is. But the question is whether your data has enough information to match the ideal candidate is a different question. For example, in SOP, I may not write about things that you care about. So then it becomes difficult. It will be very noisy.
yeah, so that's what will then address what Anubhav is feeling.
No, because his third point is that this candidate spent time to write the motivation letter, which means that they would have had to look at the job description and actually attempt to address it, right? And if they don't, then irrespective of how good their CV is,
But I think Neha, you will speak next, so I don't want to take much time.
That's all right. We're just doing brainstorming in the last session as well, and we're doing it now, so I don't mind. Ashmita, what do you think? Because we do have
Yeah,
to.
please, very much.
So then what this code does is, so that green thing is exactly this code, not the code, the prompt. And what this does is it returns the scores. So the scores are returned in the form of an Excel sheet. And
Ritwik, sorry, could you
Yeah.
please show me where you give the prompt of the paragraph describing about the motivation data?
that's the green one is the
Green.
prompt.
so into which, this is just into ChatGPT.
This is
screen,
ChatGPT, yeah.
this screen is Chat, okay.
And this Python.
This is Python, yes.
This is okay.
So what this
You
is
can
doing,
give same ChatGPT prompt to Python where you use the ChatGPT packages. Prompts are easy to get this way.
So why did you use ChatGPT and not any other, I don't know, whatever terms you use, efficient directory or...
Claude, because it was a friend of mine had ChatGPT subscription.
Okay. Yeah, no, so I'm thinking about, so this might be my lack of understanding. So there are obviously these so ChatGPT is an LLM, and which is different from NLP.
Not different. The ChatGPT is an NLP.
Okay, so and then there are all these other NLPs, and you could have used something else as well, but you decided to use ChatGPT.
You could
No,
have
So now sentiment is done.
Right,
Sentiment is
right,
done.
right. Okay, so, okay, right, yes.
So now we have, for each of these motivation letters, we have scores from artificial, from the machines and from the humans. And this is what the distribution of the score looks like. So all these concerns that will not be able to pick up what we really care about, how valid is it? Of course, you can see that there is substantial, each dot is a motivation letter, and there is substantial variation, but overall you get a positive correlation between the two scores.
Sorry, the artificial intelligence is this, and the human one
Is on the y-axis.
is on the y-axis, and so you've got a positive.
Yeah. So if you do a bean skater, then you will see that it looks much more nice. But
The problem is you'll never be able to get the top 5 candidates being the same from both the artificial intelligence and the human, because I mean the direction is the same, but you never know who's going to turn up at the top, because the variation there is so much.
yes, so what this is telling you is, so take a look at this person here. This person, the artificial intelligence gave it the highest rating, but for all those who received the highest rating from AI, this person got the lowest rating from human, right? However, this person's lowest rating from human is still greater than the highest rating obtained for
The artificial
artificial
intelligence
intelligence 1. Which means, if this thing here and this thing here would have large intersections, then you would be worried.
Yeah. So, sorry, if, we will not do this in the university, please do not worry, but if we were to do this, we would be, what we would be thinking is the final,
Where?
let's say we were running this through some job applications in the university, then the final set of people is what we would be looking at.
No, but I mean, I was just kidding when I said that.
No, I know you were
Yeah,
kidding,
yeah.
but
So
I'm trying to get
the
a feel
so-
for what the implication of this is in terms
Wearing-
of human and artificial.
Are you wearing your researcher hat or administrator's
Researcher hat.
Researcher
Yeah.
hat. Researcher hat, you can do anything you want. Your researcher
but-
hat.
But what's the outcome? So what are you saying is the outcome at the end of this?
Ah.
Sorry.
So-
This lot here.
So the outcome for me in this paper,
Now, see,
Who will be
this
selected?
lot here
She's asking.
have been highly scored both by artificial intelligence and sort of by, so really from your point of view, are you saying that this lot, if you were going to advise somebody at the end of your paper saying, okay, from a recruitment, from a motivational statement point of view, artificial intelligence and human intelligence has made a similar decision, is that the final group or no?
but am I wearing the researcher hat?
Researcher hat.
The researcher hat, I wouldn't make any of those recommendations. Any of those recommendations. What I would do is, what is the purpose of this exercise for us? The purpose of this exercise for us is to find out whether the randomized treatment of affirmative action changes I don't care about levels at all.
Yeah.
I don't care about levels at all. All I want to show is, look, independent of who rates this statement of motivations, affirmative action policy increases the quality of the motivational letters that have been collected.
I forgot the question.
That's all I care about. Now, if I were to wear the administrator's hat, I would be very concerned about the false positives, about letting go people who are really good because of this. So what I would do is, I would reduce the number of applications from 800, let's say by 50%, and use these kind of principles, that what is the minimum level where there is no intersection, right? So this is the minimum level where there is no intersection. And here, of course, even a 2 coincides with 3, but maybe you have a more precise estimate, then you would, but as an administrator, I would be very cognizant of the fact that these are imprecise measures, but is there a way to make this more efficient? I would definitely use some of these tools to make these more efficient. So Kahneman used to say something which I absolutely believe in, which is that humans make mistakes, machines make mistakes, humans and machines together make less mistakes. Right? So when you're interviewing, perhaps if you have those AI scores in front of you, just like we have the GRE scores in front of us when we are making admission decisions, perhaps that will help.
Okay, that's really useful.
But for us, none of this is.
So just like to take maybe half an hour in a session and not be there in session.
Yeah.
Spoken about it. This could be a bit of yes, it's
I just want one small question. I presume that there is a formatted application. I presume that you are proceeding on a motivational letter. Which letter has all the parameters and every applicant has accepted each one of them?
No, motivational letter is a free form.
Then how is say the family background? So many other things.
If they write, they write. If they don't write, we don't know about it.
But in that case, it will, I don't know how you will be able to bracket a particular type of, let's say, inferior or slightly more superior, unless you have all your parameters answered.
Absolutely. These are all measurement errors, and if I'm interested in the treatment effect, I don't care. And what I mean is, so you give two different conditions.
I'm imagining these large-scale projects which are taking place in the countries, lakhs and lakhs of teachers, lakhs and lakhs of, so there, I suppose the system can work, but as you have segregated, let's say, one part which is superior than the rest, multiple such exercises will have to be done, but the number is so large.
Yeah, yeah.
In that case, why can't you prescribe that you must send a motivational letter, and that motivational letter should include these values?
I'm sure there are different ways of doing it. I'm sure this is one way of doing it. What you're suggesting is definitely one way of doing it. But the final word of this session to Anupam. So tell us about the limitations and what we should be careful about.
I think we should be careful about bias and fairness in machine learning, because the problem with machine learning is that whatever decisions or decisions you make, that goes back into training the model again. So it can perpetuate biases much more than humans perpetuate their own biases. Because in the sense that once a human comes to be aware of their biases, they are much more cognizant of the rest of the decisions that they make. And it's not clear that LLMs can be also, we're not sure about the mechanism that it is. For me it is this, like when I, when I'm doing stuff as a theoretical computer scientist, I'm really interested in what is the computation function, like what is the methodology, how is it doing this, and that's very important for me, so that I can also validate my answer. So that when that power is taken away from me, and when I sort of outsource that decision to somebody else, I think that we should be a bit distrustful about it. Just a bit. And there are areas like sentiment analysis, I'm completely okay with it, because it is one place where fairness is not a big concern. It's not whereas when it is like a more latent construct that is actually dependent a lot on the societal structure itself, I would like there to be a human intervention to actually, to train it on the local data and not look at it from a global perspective, because the global perspective will be a large, it will be a macro view that is not really, applicable to whichever section that I'm looking at.
So just to try and get a sense of the way that Ritwik set up his paper, which is there was a machine learning component and also a human component, that you would think helps with the biases, or do you think that that's not enough?
Again, for me, most important thing is what question do I apply it to?
Yeah.
That is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Like, I think that this test should be done. I mean, you have to understand whether there's a positive correlation, whether there's no correlation at all between like what is machine generated and what human measures. But at the same time, I should be like much more, careful about where I apply it.
Yeah, so from what I understand, like he was not trying to devise a strategy for admissions.
No.
He was just testing whether this
Particular treatment works or not.
So it doesn't matter, like if the mechanism that is outputting is the same as it is outputting pre and post, and he's looking at the change, so it's fine.
Okay, so I have a question. Now, what you're saying is, and what you did was you used an LLM and you asked human beings, and you feel in a way that using both might reduce bias. Because human beings have a bias which the machine will not have. Machines have bias which the human beings will not have. What if human beings and the machine's biases are in the same direction? And just give an example.
That is more likely to happen.
Yes.
It's not the opposite. It's most likely that
So
biases add up.
The biases add up. Yes,
It's not that the machine is not biased. That's not true at all.
No.
It's data driven.
Yes.
The machine is not biased when I devise an algorithm based on a bunch of rules that I design. And there I say that this bias cannot creep in.
So
for instance,
that is why it will be always positively correlated.
Exactly.
That's
So
what we say.
that's what I'm trying to say. So the positive correlation is not because they are doing. They're both correct. The positive correlation might be because they're both wrong.
Yeah.
Or they're both biased.
Yeah.
And
But
what will you do when that is the issue? I mean, so this is a question to both of you. So this
Yeah,
just
so
to give you
in
an
this
example.
context, it shouldn't matter because
In this context, it shouldn't matter. But I
For
just
our
remember.
context,
Yeah.
it
would matter, yeah.
I just remember this one example of where some again I might not understand it, but the problem or the problem at hand was to try and find out the safest routes in a city, right? And Google or whatever AI tool was used put all the routes that did not have black shops.
Yeah.
The human being who looked at it was like, yes, I have, yes, these are the safe routes, these are the unsafe routes, because they had the same biases. And so in that case, it's not like the human being is helping, it's not like the machine is helping. So the concern that you have continues.
Yeah, but then it's like, okay, so this happens this again is because, see, someone went and analyzed, okay, if they did this safe routes and, without any sort of like analyzing of why was this considered a safe route. And if your LLM is not giving you the, reason why it's devising it as a safe route, then that's a dangerous prospect because you're not thinking back on the decisions. You're making your decisions and you're not, reflecting on them. So that.
But more important, the way Ritwik gave the command, in that version, you would actually define what you mean by a safe route. There are fewer accidents on this route.
Again,
There have been.
But that could be an economic constraint, isn't it? Like there are fewer accidents because well-off people are living.
No, that's fine. But you want. I mean, you can. What do you mean by safe? It's what you want in your study, right? So you're either studying accidents or you're studying muggings, and it's fine. I mean, you might end up with a situation where the outcome says that there's a black neighborhood where there are more muggings. Okay, so yes, that is biased, but you have given it a very specific question. You're not simply saying it's safe.
Yeah, but then.
So unless and until so if you say, I want a route that has fewer muggings, okay?
So
It
that
might come
charges
up.
See,
That's a
where
bias.
where I know about the bias, I can give the prompt. But if I
Yeah,
myself
when you don't know,
Yeah,
it might be
yeah.
problematic. But
and that's what we are trying to get here, right? Don't we know?
for our study, this way.
Yeah.
But I mean more generally, the more careful you are about the prompt, the less.
Fewer biases you might get.
No, but in the sense that, but again, I
You
You
can
can
test
test
it.
it out, but it's not like, see, if
Yes.
somebody tells me that, there are less
We're
mummies
going to finish this at
historically.
12:30, it's 12:27, so
Yeah,
finish
3
your
minutes.
arguments in the next
Yeah,
3
so
minutes.
basically they don't have a mathematical model
Yeah.
of
No, no, they do,
correctness.
No, the problem is they have a
No.
mathematical model, but we are not sure that.
No, they don't have a mathematical model.
Yeah, statistical model.
They have statistical
Yeah.
model. That is how.
So that is the difference.
Yeah.
That's what.
None of our empirical results are based on mathematical models.
But there is a theoretical, some
No,
understanding.
here we do have an economics model.
All I would say is don't trust the levels. Don't trust the levels, but trust the treatment effects.
Yeah.
No, but I wouldn't even trust the levels. I wouldn't blindly trust the levels. It has to be interpretable.
No, Anubhav, we have something called, we care about treatment. So what does one mean by treatment? So let's say there are 10,000, but we can't finish it in 2 minutes. So over lunch.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm not going to bring up my PowerPoint because I do not have it.
Let's just finish it off and then take break, because anyway we have to,
Yeah, yeah.
we only have half an hour.
Yeah, so this is the finishing, closing session. I guess to start with, I wanted to thank you. Thank you, Ashmita. Thank you, ADRI. Two things. One is that the work that you are doing here has been extremely inspiring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can just omit
No,
that part.
yeah. Okay, so it's not for you. It's for ADRI in general.
Do you have a presentation?
I do have a presentation, but I'm not going to use it. Yeah?
Okay.
And this, work that you do here is really inspiring. And the second is that I'm really touched by your hospitality. So thank you very much. And in this last session, I basically wanted to, the idea originally was to try and discuss all our objectives for our research project. So we have sort of broadly 2 objectives. One is trying to understand what good jobs are, good quality occupations are, in terms of, say, people's so the task content of jobs, but also people's aspirations, people's idea of prestige. And the secondly, we also wanted to know, so within this, we also wanted to understand what the skill gaps were between what people were doing and what people wanted to do. And all these discussions on machine learning techniques and interviews, etc., was with the view of answering answering this first research question on what is good jobs and what is the skill gap. Now the second part of our research project is to try and understand how we can help to bridge this skill gap, and that's what I wanted to talk here, because we have representatives from organizations who are already working on this, like ISECTIOM and JSS and so on. So what I was hoping to do here is get your feedback or some suggestions from you as to what it is that can be done. So suppose that with our data collection, we do fantastic data collection, use this fancy machine learning tools that Anup's bias-free machine learning tools that Anup's going to give us. Yeah. And figure out the skill gaps. What would be helpful from us? What could we contribute that would help reduce the skill gap? So things that I was thinking of were, maybe we could try and design some modules that we could we could design some modules that we could recommend to you, ISECTIOM, and then we could try and implement it to a sample of women and see, or men and women, and see the impact of it. And so what I was thinking is that maybe we could use a session to think about such possibilities. Yeah. So say for example from ISECTIOM, what would be helpful? So broadly we are interested in what kind of jobs people of marginalized communities do and what they aspire to do, and look at the difference between these two. And then, what would be the next step?
So, as per our need, we are looking for, yesterday I was talking about that. So we have a profile of abilities, and they are graduated from this 2 years journey, जहाँ पर लाइफ स्किल्स के बारे में, बाकी और भी चीज़ें हैं जहाँ वी आर ट्राइंग टू ट्रेन देम on some set of competencies. So if I will talk about our challenges, we are just looking for the opportunities what are the available in our locality, जहाँ पे हमारी लड़कियाँ, हमारे जो वुमेन लीडर्स हैं वो जाके वहाँ पे कुछ जॉब कर सकें. If I got your question rightly, please correct me. तो उनको उनके प्रोफाइल से संबंधित कैसे हम जॉब प्रोवाइड कर सकते हैं वहाँ पे मुझे समझने की ज़रूरत है. बिकॉज वी ट्राई टू गेट सम लाइक नॉन ट्रेडिशनल जॉब्स और जो बाकी कुछ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है उनके साथ टच पॉइंट्स करके.
So you were saying that they have a specific, the girls have a specific skills, how to map them to a job that,
जॉब मार्केट.
yeah,
Okay, so
that would be,
so that is what you think is more useful rather than providing particular skills.
So the two things, like I'm just, we have some set of skills जहाँ हम इसको leverage करके job markets तक लेके जा सकते हैं. And the another thing that we are looking for कि available jobs या फिर जो चीज़ें हैं जहाँ पर लोग जा सकते हैं, what are the skills that is needed जहाँ पर हम उनको train कर सकते हैं. तो एक तो अपना कुछ सेट ऑफ मतलब पैरामीटर्स हैं, कुछ अपने करिकुलम है जिससे लोग जा रहे हैं. लेकिन अब दूसरा क्या होता है कि लगभग जैसे उनका सेकेंड ईयर कंप्लीट होने वाला है तो वी कोलैबोरेट विद सम ऑर्गेनाइजेशन लाइक वी आर डूइंग इट विद मेधा और उनका ऑर्गेनाइजेशन वो हेल्प अस कि कुछ ऐसे सेट ऑफ चाहिए, स्किल्स होने चाहिए, ट्रेंड होने चाहिए ताकि उनको जॉब मिलने में आसानी होगी. तो दूसरा चीज़ ये था कि क्या क्या ऐसे डिज़ायर्ड मतलब ऐसे रिक्वायरमेंट्स हैं जो एक एम्प्लॉय बनने के लिए या फिर एम्प्लॉयबिलिटी लेने के लिए उनको रिक्वायर्ड चाहिए.
Yeah.
देन वी कैन ऐड इनटू आवर करिकुलम और ऐसा स्पेसिफाई करके उनको ट्रेन कर सकते हैं. तो दोनों चीज़ें.
आपके जो एक्सपीरियंस है,
जी.
what is your experience है कि जो employees हुए हैं, who were those, like what if you have to like just tell us कि कौन से वो skills थे जो ज़्यादा काम आते हैं लोकल लेबर मार्केट में employability होने में.
ओके. सो अभी जहाँ पे लोग जैसे एक चीज़ तो पूरा ऑर्गेनाइजेशन जिस पे बिल्ड है अभी. सो वी आर मोस्टली डूइंग कोचिंग एंड मेंटरिंग प्रैक्टिसेस जहाँ पे लीडरशिप और ये सब पे हम काम कर रहे हैं. तो हमारे एडु लीडर्स भी जो है मोस्टली दे आर ट्रेन्ड ऑन दिस कोचिंग कन्वर्सेशन और बाकी इन सब चीज़ों पे. तो उसमें क्या हो रहा है कि एक तो ऑर्गेनाइजेशन जिस तरीके से ग्रो कर रही है, बहुत सारे ऐसे एडु लीडर्स हैं जो ट्रेंड लोग ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में ही बाकी कोचिंग मेंटरिंग के लिए लोग आगे बढ़ रहे हैं जहाँ बाकी को लोग मेंटर कर रहे हैं. दूसरा जैसे मैं LFW के बारे में भी कल बता रहा था कि LFW में बेसिकली टीचर्स के साथ कन्वर्सेशन, कोचिंग कन्वर्सेशन और ये सब के लिए उनको एक रिक्वायरमेंट्स थे जहाँ पे एक टेली कम्युनिकेशन और ये सब बाकी चीज़ों में लोगों को वहाँ पे लिया गया. तीसरा जो एलिमेंट है वो है कुछ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है जहाँ पे उनको कम्युनिटीज़ में उनको जैसे उनके रीच, बाकी जैसे पेरेंट्स के साथ कम्युनिटीज़ के साथ इंटरेक्शन, उनके साथ इंटरेक्ट होके अब बाकी कुछ रिसर्च एलिमेंट्स भी हैं जहाँ पर जैसे प्रथम का ले लें तो कैसे स्कूल में जाके बच्चों के साथ, पेरेंट्स के साथ उनका एक इंटरेक्शन हो. कुछ ऐसे सेट ऑफ चीज़ें हैं जहाँ पर अंडरस्टैंडिंग बिल्ड करनी है, कुछ कन्वर्सेशन करना है. वहाँ पे इस तरह के प्रोफाइल्स अभी आगे बढ़ रहे हैं. तो ये दो तीन चीज़ तो है जहाँ पे कुछ कंप्यूटर स्किल्स का है जहाँ पे उनको कंप्यूटर्स के कुछ अंडरस्टैंडिंग जैसे माइक्रोसॉफ्ट ऑफिस और ये बाकी इस तरह की चीज़ें ट्रेनिंग में उनको मिलके.
वो तो आप लोग ये सब चीज़ कर रहे हैं, बट आई एम आस्किंग इज कि व्हाट एक्चुअली इज वर्किंग. ये सारे स्किल्स तो हो गए, तो क्या वो लोग जो अच्छा कम्युनिकेट कर सकते हैं, आर दोज द वन हु गेट जॉब्स, मे बी लाइक वो कुछ उसका कुछ आपके पास बेस्ड ऑन योर एक्सपीरियंस.
हाँ, मोस्टली इस तरह के लोग जो बहुत एक्टिव हैं और वो कर पा रहे हैं वो दे आर गेटिंग जॉब्स. अभी जैसे अभी एक सेट जैसे हम लोग ने माइक्रो फाइनेंस के तरफ भी मूव कर रहे थे जहाँ पे कम्युनिटी में लोगों के साथ मिलना करना, उनको लोगों के साथ जोड़ना, ये सब का एक स्किल सेट दिख रहा था जहाँ पे जो एक रिक्वायरमेंट्स के इसमें पर्सपेक्टिव में आ रहा है. तो उसमें भी जो लोग सेलेक्ट हो रहे हैं हु आर द लाइक मोर कॉन्फिडेंस और उनको अगर कोचिंग कन्वर्सेशन बात करने का तरीका, क्योंकि हम लोग जब इसमें देखते हैं ना तो लोग कन्वर्सेशन करना, बात करना, लोगों से कम्युनिकेट करना, ये सब स्किल्स हैं जो वो धीरे धीरे ग्रो अपने आप में बिल्ड करते हैं। तो उसका रिक्वायरमेंट्स और उनको तुरंत में फिर अपॉर्चुनिटीज, मल्टीपल अपॉर्चुनिटीज के भी 2-3 उनको मौके मिलते हैं।
So can I just check, आपने कहा पहले when this was talking कि you get back a lot of feedback आपके edu leaders से, regular feedback, और आप भी उसको analyze करते हैं। तो analyze करके आप report बनाते हैं या वो data कहीं है कि
नहीं, वो डेटा सेट है पूरा। तो मंथली वी आर जनरेटिंग, वी हैव 3 to 4 प्रोसेसेस। तो पहला है कोचिंग कन्वर्सेशन का, जो मैं बोल रहा था, बडी टॉक्स हैं। तो 1 आवर का पूरा बडी टॉक है उनका। उस बडी टॉक में इट्स मोस्टली फोकस ऑन देयर पर्सनल ग्रोथ, पर्सनल लीडरशिप। तो उनके करियर, उनके अपॉर्चुनिटीज, उनको क्या करना है, एस्पिरेशन और बाकी इन सब पे कन्वर्सेशन है पूरा। जो हम एस्पिरेशन सर्वे पहले उनसे करते हैं स्टार्टिंग में, बेस्ड ऑन दैट एस्पिरेशन सर्वे उस पर एक कन्वर्सेशन उनका मंथली पूरे 2 साल के जर्नी में हर महीने होता है। तो वी आर जनरेटिंग लाइक अराउंड 300 to 500 का डेटा इस पूरे 1 घंटे के कन्वर्सेशन में।
like interview conversations.
Can we do this like intervention and change the exact methodology that you used on this kind of case?
तो मैं बस अगर उसको ऐड करूं, उसमें 2 चीज़ जो AI और मशीन लर्निंग के हम लोग बात कर रहे थे, तो हम लोगों के पास भी वो चैलेंज आ रहा था कि बहुत सारा डेटा आ रहा है, लेकिन उससे निकल क्या रहा है ये जान पाना, समझ पाना बहुत क्विकली बहुत मुश्किल हो रहा था। क्योंकि अभी अर्लियर पहले नंबर्स कम थे, 100-50 ऐसे नंबर रह रहा था, तो लोग ऐसे अपने से भी देख के एनालिसिस करके सम ये पाइवट टेबल और बाकी चीज़ों से निकाल रहे थे। लेकिन अभी क्योंकि नंबर्स ज़्यादा होता है और पूरा नेशनल लेवल पे कुछ समझ बनाने के लिए, तो अभी क्या है कि 1 घंटे का वो पूरा फॉर्म भरना होता है। जैसे बड़ी टॉक आपने किया, यू हैव टू फिल अ लॉन्ग फॉर्म। अभी उसके लिए हम लोग क्या कर रहे हैं, जेमिनाई का यूज करके, तो पूरे कन्वर्सेशन को रिकॉर्ड करके, तो जो वॉइस का पूरा वॉइस रिकॉर्डिंग है, इट्स कन्वर्ट टू टेक्स्ट में डाल के वो ऑटोमेटिक फॉर्म्स फिलिंग, पूरा जो फॉर्म है
टेक्स्ट कैसे डालते हैं?
टेक्स्ट AI की मदद से जो वॉइस है उसको कन्वर्ट करके टेक्स्ट में, वहीं पे पूरा MNE का अपना जो स्ट्रक्चर है, MIS का अपना, उसमें वो कन्वर्ट होकर फॉर्म में जनरेट होता है।
हिंदी में होता है ये?
हिंदी में भी हो रहा है, लेकिन मोस्टली टेक्स्ट जो है वो इंग्लिश में लिखा होता है। इट्स वेरी ओपन एंडेड क्वेश्चन।
लेकिन इंटरव्यू आपके हिंदी में है ना?
हिंदी में, हाँ।
तो लेकिन टेक्स्ट जनरेट हो रहा है?
हाँ, तो हिंदी में जो हम लोग कर रहे हैं कन्वर्सेशन, वो जनरेट होता है टेक्स्ट, वो इंग्लिश और हिंदी दोनों।
तो जैसे हम बात कर रहे हैं तो HUMBA,
हाँ, एग्जैक्टली उस टाइप से।
So it's transliterated rather than.
हाँ, तो उसमें जो एक जगह मदद कर रहा है, वो मैं पूरा आपको प्रोसेस भी दिखा सकता हूँ कैसे वो जनरेट हो रहा है। हाँ, तो एक तो वहाँ पे इनपुट साइड पे डेटा जनरेट हो रहा है, जहाँ पर मतलब एक जो AI का जो यूज है वहाँ पर जनरेट गैदर करने में, डेटा गैदर करने में हम लोग, क्योंकि उसमें टाइम टेकिंग प्रोसेस था, उसको सॉर्ट करने के लिए एक प्रोसेस बनाया गया। लेकिन दूसरा उसमें एनालिसिस पर्सपेक्टिव से, तो महीने का ना, हर मंथ में हम लोग थोड़ा बैठ के जैसे मेंटर्स या प्रोग्राम लेवल पर पूरा एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग की क्या चल रहा है। तो बडी टॉक एक प्रोसेस है, तो ओवरऑल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में बडी टॉक से क्या ऐसी चीज़ें निकल के आ रही हैं, जो जैसे हम लोग बडी टॉक का जो ऑब्जेक्टिव होता है, उसमें ऑब्जेक्टिव में हम लोग बात कर रहे हैं कि उनके पर्सनल एस्पिरेशन को लेके बात हुआ। तो कुछ सेट ऑफ चीज़ें, जैसे अपना हेल्थ से रिलेटेड चीज़ें हो गई, अपने रिलेशन से चीज़ें, रिलेशन ऑब्जेक्टिव पे बातचीत हुई, या फिर अपने करियर में कुछ उनको करना है जहाँ पर प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है। तो अब ऑर्गेनाइजेशन लेवल पे जो पूरा बडी टॉक हुआ, जैसे मान लिया 400 लोगों के साथ कन्वर्सेशन हुई, तो 400 के बीच में क्या क्या ऐसे मेजर चैलेंजेस निकल के आ रहे हैं लोगों के, कहाँ पे ऐसे फोकस एरिया है जहाँ पे उनको काम करने की ज़रूरत है, या हमें कुछ एक्ट करने की ज़रूरत है, जहाँ पे कुछ जैसे रेड फ्लैग जैसा कुछ चीज़ दिख रहा है जहाँ पे हमें तुरंत एक्ट करने की ज़रूरत है। तो AI के मदद से, मतलब प्रोसेसिंग के मदद से हमें कुछ वो बहुत शार्पली मतलब एनालाइज करके डेटा मिल जा रहा है सामने, जहाँ पे डिसीजन मेकिंग में, बात करने में, कुछ अगला स्टेप क्या होगा, अगले महीने में हम क्या एक्शन ले सकते हैं, ये यहाँ पर मदद मिलता है। तो ये बाकी अलग अलग चीज़ों के लिए भी है। जैसे क्लासरूम ऑब्जर्वेशन है हमारा, तो क्लासरूम ऑब्जर्वेशन में पूरा उनका ऑब्जर्वेशन का पूरा फॉर्म और डेटा जो इनपुट हो रहा है, उसका भी एनालिसिस इसी तरीके से निकल के कि क्या ऐसे स्किल सेट हैं जिस पर तुरंत काम करने की ज़रूरत है, डेवलपमेंट के लिए हमें कहाँ फोकस करना है इसको, तो यहाँ आपका हेल्पफुल हो रहा है।
So, is it too late for him to show it to us? Or?
हाँ, टाइम
So
अगर allow
we
करें।
just have now around 20 minutes. what would you like to do?
ये मतलब एक एक्सेल शीट पे पूरा डेटा जनरेटेड है, तो सिंपल मैं दिखा के ऐसे बता सकता हूँ उसमें अगर अगर ये हो सकता है तो यहाँ से भी हम दिखा देंगे या हाँ जी, तो ये जैसे एग्जांपल्स के तौर पे बडी टॉक का एक मान लिया एग्जांपल को, तो बडी टॉक में एक फॉर्म है जो उनको डिटेल फॉर्म स्ट्रक्चर्ड बेस्ड ऑन कन्वर्सेशन उनको फील करना होता है। ये जो बडी है हमारे जो कन्वर्सेशन कर रहे हैं वो इसको फीडिंग करते हैं बेटा। ये जो लिख रहा था ना अभी, जैसे हम लोग बात कर रहे थे कि हिंदी में हो रहा है क्या, तो अभी पहले वो इंग्लिश में टेक्स्ट हम में HUM में चल रहा था, लेकिन अब हिंदी टेक्स्ट में भी सीधा सीधा आ जा रहा है वहाँ पे। तो ये फॉर्म है और कुछ रेटिंग्स हैं उस पर, एक डिटेल्ड फॉर्म है जिस पर जिनको भरना होता है। अगर अब ये फॉर्म पूरा का पूरा ऐसे जो इनपुट है, बहुत बहुत लंबा फॉर्म है, सब कुछ टेक्स्ट बहुत सारा लिखा हुआ है, ओपन एंडेड क्वेश्चंस के साथ सब उसमें हो गया, तो इसमें एक तो क्वांटिटेटिव एनालिसिस भी होता है, लेकिन क्वालिटेटिव एनालिसिस में जो हमें समरी मिल रहा है, मतलब वो हो क्या रहा है उसमें, वो यहाँ पर निकल के आ जा रहा है। मैं अगर आपको लास्ट अभी इस मंथ का देखूँ, हाँ
वो क्या है वो
AI का जैसे चैट GPT है वैसे जेमिनाई गूगल का। हाँ, तो जैसे बडी टॉक हुआ तो पूरा जो हाई समरी है पूरे टॉक का वो वहाँ पे निकल के, जैसे उसमें हम लोग कुछ चीज़ें देखते हैं जहाँ पे हमारे एडिटर्स जो हैं क्या अच्छा फील कर रहे हैं। मान लिया उनको पूरी कन्वर्सेशन स्टार्ट होता है कि आपको क्या इस महीने सबसे अच्छा फील हुआ, तो उसका कुछ समरी यहाँ पे क्या क्या है। तो जैसे मोटा मोटा फेस्टिवल में, क्योंकि फेस्टिवल सीजन था तो उसमें लोग कैसे फील कर रहे हैं, परिवार के साथ खुशियाँ, समुदाय में सकारात्मक बदलाव, नए कौशल, सब कुछ चीज़ें हैं।
ये सब ऑडियो में था, बाद में
ये ऑडियो में था, तो दो तरह से अभी हो रहा है। ऑडियो का हम लोग मोस्टली अभी यूज ऑडियो पे स्टार्ट किए हैं और कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि सब लोग ऑडियो यूज करें अभी, क्योंकि शुरुआती समय में थोड़ा लर्निंग के लिए यूज हुआ था उसमें सैम्पलिंग में, ट्रेनिंग और इसके पर्पज से, लेकिन अभी थोड़ा वो वहाँ से निकल के आ जा रहा है सर। तो अभी ऐसे थोड़ा दोनों मिक्सर में है, कुछ लोग टेक्स्ट भी भर रहे हैं लेकिन मोस्टली जो है अपने ऑडियो से भी निकालते हैं।
सॉरी इफ आई कैन आस्क, कौन सा प्लेटफॉर्म आपने इस्तेमाल किया?
जेमिनाई
ऑडियो से
हाँ, मैं बहुत ज़्यादा टेक्निकल एक्सपर्ट नहीं हूँ इसके बारे में, तो आदित्य से, क्योंकि ये लोग जो पूरा देख रही है, मेरी जो अंडरस्टैंडिंग है उस बेस पे बात कर रहा हूँ। लेकिन हाँ, तो वो और एक एलिमेंट अपना डेवलप्ड ये MIS प्लेटफॉर्म है। हाँ, तो वो डेटा स्टूडियो से लिंक करके पूरा बना हुआ है, वहाँ पे हम लोग जेमिनाई और इस सब का यूज करके कन्वर्ट कर रहे हैं इसको।
और एक क्वेश्चन, ये जो है यहाँ ये वो जेमिनाई में एक्सट्रैक्ट किया या दिस इज द फुल कन्वर्सेशन?
नहीं, एक्चुअली ना ये फुल कन्वर्सेशन नहीं है, फुल उसका डेटा सेट, इसमें और भी सीट्स हैं बहुत सारे, ये समरी सेट है पूरा, तो वो प्रोसेस होके समराइज करके यहाँ पे डेटा कर रही है।
और आपने उसको कुछ प्रॉम्प्ट दिया ना? हाँ, आपने प्रॉम्प्ट दिया और उसके बाद ये निकल के आया।
तो ये पूरा समरी निकल के आया, क्या क्या पॉजिटिव चेंजेस हो रहे हैं उसका एक समरी निकल के आया, कम्युनिटी रिलेटेड चीज़ें क्या क्या कन्वर्सेशन में जो मोस्टली जो निकल के आ रहा है उसमें, वहाँ पे कुछ सजेशंस हैं तो वो हम यहाँ पे निकाल के दे दिया सजेशंस को लेकर।
तो इसके बाद आप आई डोंट नो हाउ मेनी एडुकेशन लीडर्स यू हैव, उन सब का समरी करके कहीं रखते हैं। सो गोइंग बैक टू अश्मिता's क्वेश्चन, आपको पता है कि इन सब में किसको जॉब मिला, किस यू नो फॉर whom it was successful, who it wasn't successful, ये ऐसा एनालाइज करते हैं?
हाँ, हमारा वो डेटा है पूरा हमारे पास।
डेटा है।
हाँ, तो वो पूरा MIS का एक सेट है पूरा, जिसमें हम जो एलुमनाई हैं, जो ग्रेजुएटेड एडु लीडर्स हैं, उनका पूरा डेटा और एक टाइम टू टाइम उसमें हम लोग वहाँ से फीडिंग भी करते हैं, स्टेटस चेकिंग की अभी क्या है, अभी की स्थिति कहाँ है, कहाँ पे हैं लोग,
और वो हम देख सकते हैं like public like us और
पब्लिकली वो डेटा तो नहीं होगा
और
इंटर
अश्मिता कैसे
नहीं कोई भी मतलब ऐसा होगा तो हम लोग शेयर करके तो
talk to them and request
देन उस पर्पस से तो
and then आपको उसमें से क्या what would you need from us if we can know that then happy
they provide useful data for us also to input into the system but ask a question because you have this impact.
I mean, I think that has to be a different conversation.
yeah so for the impact I think we can only I think if we can recommend the module
That's what I wanted to know. Would it be helpful for them to be
unless we recommend it because what we are doing currently
Yeah, I mean they can only recommend based on their findings, which is why we need their analysis, then figure out. But then that may or may not fit with our data.
yeah so that we can check like what we are doing we are giving training in communications but maybe what is more from this would come out those who are getting placed or better at maths.
like we are looking for this yesterday I was just talking about that कि
Maybe
उसमें
just doing some sort of an MOU which shows that we can do this. And we also are in the process of doing an MOU with the industries ministry which is basically just that. Yes.
हम उसको डिस्कस कर सकते हैं आई थिंक जो डेटा क्योंकि यहाँ पे जो हम लोग क्योंकि एआई मशीन लर्निंग और बाकी जो डेटा निकल के आ रहा है एक सेट बता रहा था बड़ी टॉक के एनालिसिस पे हम लोग जा रहे हैं बहुत सारे अलग अलग चीज़ों में हम लोग डेटा लेने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं अबाउट दिस एजेंडा क्योंकि 2 दिन से जिस पर हम लोग बात कर रहे हैं तो एस्पिरेशन और जो जॉब प्रोफाइल्स को डेवलप करने की बात कर रहे हैं ना वहाँ पे हम लोगों ने एक टूल डेवलप किया है जहाँ हम लोग एक फेलो बेसलाइन करके हम लोगों ने बनाया है तो फेलो बेसलाइन में जितने एडू लीडर्स हैं ये तो अपने प्रोसेसेस हैं जो 2 साल में उनको अलग अलग डेवलप करना होता है जो मैं एस्पिरेशन सर्वे की बात कर रहा था तो वहाँ पे पूरा एक डिटेल्ड सर्वे है जहाँ एडू लीडर्स का अलग अलग क्वेश्चनर पे उनके अंडरस्टैंडिंग वो करना क्या चाहते हैं बाकी चीज़ों पे हम लोग इनपुट लेके कर जैसे अगर आप यहाँ देखोगे तो इसमें शैक्षणिक और करियर आकांक्षाओं संबंधित प्रश्न उनके अपने एस्पिरेशन और बाकी चीज़ों पे डिस्कस करना आगे पढ़ना चाहते हैं ऐसा क्या है जो आपको पढ़ने से रोकेगा पढ़ना चाहते हैं तो हम मतलब एक टूल पूरा बना हुआ है इसमें जिस पे अपने कुछ उनकी खुद के पर्सनल अंडरस्टैंडिंग और बेस्ड ऑन देयर एक्सपीरियंस वो एक फीडिंग करना नहीं ये खुद से भी डेवलप हुआ है अपने से भी बनाया है कुछ का सपोर्ट अलग अलग जगह से मिला है हम लोग उसको पूरा डिटेल में एक बार हम लोग बात कर सकते हैं लेकिन हाँ वो सपोर्ट और अपने कुछ ऐसे जो MIS का पूरा टीम है वो बैठ के इसको बना रहा है लेकिन रिसर्च या फिर इस तरह की क्वेश्चनर बनाने में भी हम लोगों को कहीं से हेल्प तो मिला है
आपने जब कहा पहले कि आप उनको मॉड्यूल्स देते हैं लाइक ट्रेनिंग के लिए वो मॉड्यूल्स आप कहाँ से एक्सेस करते हैं
मॉड्यूल जिन पे उनकी ट्रेनिंग हो रही है
हाँ
वो पूरा कंटेंट जो नॉलेज टीम है पूरा उन्होंने डेवलप किया है मल्टीपल सोर्स से तो अलग अलग सोर्स से जो हमारे करिकुलम है उस पर डेवलप किया है
सो आपका कंटेंट इन हाउस कंटेंट टीम है क्या
हाँ
आइस
पूरा नॉलेज टीम है जिसपे जो मिल के इस पे करते
Other, if we work with Saksham, there are 2 areas that we can work in or work together in. One is in collecting data using some of their questions or some framework, and the second is working with your content development team, where we can give input from our findings.
Yes, it will be very helpful.
That will be very helpful. And I guess the third thing that we could also think about is doing some impact evaluation. So try and see.
So I thought that this would be useful. So for example, what they say is body talk. So we have some baseline data of girls. They have an inline data of body talk. Can't we just look at the change like in terms of
I mean you mean using their data
yeah.
we can false sample,
Yeah.
for us, because we don't necessarily only want to be looking at girls between 18 and 20.
Yeah,
I know.
no,
But it
so
would be a
I'm saying
subsample
that
for
this
us.
is a separate paper.
Yeah,
separate.
yeah, that's right.
Yes, yes.
So
Where
age
you
group is
do
18, 13,
something
right? You're talking about last
18 to
30. 30.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be fabulous.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we can get the,
Yeah, I don't disagree, but I'm thinking of more in terms of the research proposal when we put it in. What would be, where would our, what would we be contributing to that is what I'm thinking.
there's also the Gen 6 plus.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
संदीप जी एक बार आप इधर आइए.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry,
And I think
this
we
is
need
very
to talk more. Yes.
इसलिए सोच रहा था कि discuss करूं।
बहुत helpful है.
कभी भी हम लोग इस पर बात करने के लिए एक टाइम फिक्स कर सकते हैं। अभी तो पता नहीं आज तो मतलब हाँ।
So we will have a Zoom call.
कभी भी
करना होगा.
करके हम लोग उसको अच्छे से डिटेल, अभी तो बहुत शॉर्टिंग सब कुछ होता है, लेकिन कुछ चीज़ हम लोग करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं।
You have actually installed to me for exactly that.
Okay.
उसमें आपको मतलब आपका काम है ट्रेनिंग प्रोग्राम करवाना ये सब उस इस काम में where is it that you think researchers can help कि रिसर्च के माध्यम से क्या ये हो सकता है जिससे आपके काम में मदद मिलेगा रिसर्च के माध्यम में मान लीजिए कोई कोर्स कोई इवैल्यूएशन
कोर्स करिकुलम क्या है उसको डेवलप करने के लिए बहुत सारे लोग हम लोग कोई आपको कोर्स को डेवलप करना तो कोर्स के डेवलपमेंट में कोर्स करिकुलम उसके डेवलपमेंट में
तो आपने तो बताया था कि जो सारे जो कोर्स है उसका जो सिलेबस वो आपको बाहर से मिलती है.
मिलती है, लेकिन बहुत बार ऐसा होता है जैसे नया कोर्स के लिए हम लोग दिए मान लिया कि मधुबनी के लिए उसका वहाँ नहीं है वो हम लोगों से डिमांड की कि आपका जो लोकल नीड है उसके आधार पर आप कुछ हमसे कुछ हमको सजेस्ट करें कि ये कोर्स हम लोग चला सकते हैं तो अगर हम उनको सजेशन करते हैं तो वो कहेंगे क्या कि आप उसको कोर्स को करिकुलम को डेवलप करके दे सकते हैं.
I mean, the thing is that we will not have the capability to design a curriculum on Madhubani, right? वो तो हम कर नहीं पाएंगे.
But what he is saying is that based on local need, you suggest the course. That we will be able to do, hopefully. I mean, that is what we are trying to do, right? So basically, what are the occupations that are there and what is the task and skill components. So that is basically trying and understanding of the local needs.
Okay.
So आपके जो ट्रेनिंग में बहुत सा मॉड्यूल्स ये टेक्निकल मॉड्यूल्स हैं या जैसे आई सक्षम करते हैं वो कम्युनिकेशंस और ऐसे भी रिक्वायर्ड होते हैं.
मेनली हमारा टेक्निकल
हाँ.
लेकिन साथ के साथ साथ हमारा जैसे एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप करनी है
Okay.
एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप हो गया कम्युनिकेशन स्किल है ये सारा भी ट्रेनिंग हमें कराना है.
और अगर एक करिकुलम आपको रेकमेंड करे उसमें what exactly would you need? आप क्या चाहेंगे कि हम उसका detailed elements आपको बताएं या I mean, sorry, I don't think I'm making my
Or
question.
you mean is it do they just
ये
want
आप ये
points
बोलना
or a
चाह रहे हैं कि
detailed
Yeah,
curriculum?
yeah,
एक करिकुलम सपोज है, ठीक है, वो हम आपको रेकमेंड कर सकते हैं कि ये ज़रूरी है.
हाँ.
So उस केस में फिर क्या होगा? What will you do?
अगर आप उसको बना सकते हैं तो ठीक है, अदरवाइज आप जो रिकमेंड करेंगे उसके आधार पर हमारी जो टेक्निकल टीम है उससे हम उसको बनवाएंगे.
Yeah, and also the other thing that we could possibly do is आपके जो already existing curriculum है we can recommend changes within it. Say for example, you have a curriculum on entrepreneurship. Now we go and talk to people and we find out that, okay, for entrepreneurs, these are the new skills that are required. Say for example, online marketing. So can we recommend sort of subsections in the module or new elements in the module? Would that be useful?
ये हम लोग कर सकते हैं. हमारे पास सिर्फ टेक्निकल जो है वो वहाँ से अप्रूव करते हैं. बाकी जो है एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप हो गया या वो हमारे ऊपर छोड़ देते हैं. तो वो आप कैसे कराते हैं, अब उसका भी हम लोग एक बना के वहाँ भेज देते हैं. भाई इस तरह से हम लोग कराएं. उसमें वो लोग कहीं पर भी
इसमें क्या क्या फिट होता है? What are the areas that fits into that जो आपके यहाँ कंट्रोल में है?
उसमें जितना भी डी क्लासेस हैं ट्रेनिंग के अलावा जो है वो उसमें हम जोड़ सकते हैं.
Thank you.
जैसे फॉरवर्ड लिंकेजेस अगर हम कहीं करते हैं तो उसमें भी क्या हो सकता है, इस तरह से इनको हम ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा उसके ऊपर हो गया एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप का ट्रेनिंग हम करा सकते हैं, मोटिवेशनल ट्रेनिंग है करा सकते हैं.
So sorry, so ये सारे एक से आप मधुबनी का कोर्स है, उसी के अंदर ये सब होगा. ये
उसमें है होता है कि जैसे मधुबनी का कोर्स है उसमें एक चैप्टर पढ़ाने के बाद वो देते हैं कि बीच में 2 दिन का क्लास है. तो हमारे ऊपर छोड़ते हैं कि आप क्या क्लास में, फिर 2 चैप्टर हो गया उसके बाद फिर हम दे देते हैं कि आप कराएंगे. तो उसका डिटेल भी हम लोग वहाँ भेजते हैं. तो जो हमारे स्टूडेंट के लिए बढ़िया रहता है वो हम लोग जिम्मेदारी कराते हैं.
So आप जब कहते हैं वहाँ भेजते हैं तो वो गवर्नमेंट को भेजते हैं क्या? वो सर्टिफाई करते हैं कि ये ठीक है या नहीं?
नहीं, वो सर्टिफाइड नहीं करेंगे उसको,
Just to inform.
इन्फॉर्म करते
अच्छा.
हैं. और अगर वो अच्छा रहता है तो उसको बोले दूसरा
I see.
भेज देते हैं.
The central government ministry which runs this program closely monitors it. But one of the challenges that we face is the compensation for the trainers is very
हाँ.
low. So
एक्चुअली दूसरा जो गवर्नमेंट का है स्कीम कौशल विकास जो PM तो उसमें उन लोग देते हैं 12,000 रुपये पर बेनिफिशियरी, 12 से 14. JSS भी बहुत कम है. JSS में 1200 से 1500
for the trainers.
No, for the
नहीं,
whole first student.
for each beneficiaries वो कम. और अभी ऑल इंडिया में सबसे बढ़िया काम जन शिक्षण ही कर रहे हैं. ये आज 50 साल से ऊपर हो गया, 67 से चल रहा है.
So it was part of the literacy mission.
हाँ, पहले
And then
नेशनल लिटरेसी मिशन उसी का ये पार्ट हो गया जिसमें हम लोग जो भी लिटरेसी का काम करते थे, जो लोग लिटरेट होते थे उनको फिर कंटिन्यूइंग एजुकेशन की तरफ हम लोग ट्रेनिंग कराते थे. अब तो लिटरेसी का काम ही गवर्नमेंट.
अच्छा, आपका टीम गाँव में जाता है, फिर वहाँ जो ये आपका कैचमेंट एरिया है जहाँ से लोग आते हैं, राइट? तो आप एक हाउस होल्ड में जाते हैं, वहाँ जाके आप बोलते हैं कि यहाँ कोई ऐसा प्रोग्राम के लिए कोई इंटरेस्टेड है या उस उम्र का कोई है या नहीं जिसका जॉब नहीं है, जो ट्रेनिंग ढूंढ रहे हैं. तो आपको ऐसे 10 मिल गए, 10 हाउस होल्ड मिल गए कि जहाँ ऐसा ट्रेनिंग करने वाले लोग हैं, ठीक है? उनको आप समझाते हैं कि ये ट्रेनिंग करो, तुम्हारा नौकरी का ऑप्शंस ज़्यादा होगा, राइट?
उसमें भी एक चीज़ और है कि हम यहाँ से जाके हर घर में नहीं जा सकते.
राइट.
तो वहाँ हम लोग करते क्या है कि वहाँ के जो लोकल मुखिया है या PRI उनसे हम लोग मिलते हैं. फिर वहाँ किसी भी गांव में हम लोग के लिए पकड़ बनी हुई है तो उनको लेके एक सर्वे फॉर्म देते हैं जो कि हर घर से वो सर्वे करते हैं कि इनके घर में कितने लोग हैं, कितने पढ़े लिखे हैं, कितने पढ़े लिखे नहीं हैं. ये हम लोग आ रही है बात? हम लोग सर्वे करते हैं गांव में, हमारे लोग जाके हर घर में जाएंगे, सर्वे करेंगे कि भाई उनके घर में कितने लोग हैं, कितने लोग पढ़े हुए हैं, एज ग्रुप क्या है, और अगर ट्रेनिंग लेना चाहते हैं तो किस ट्रेड में वो ट्रेनिंग लेंगे। तो इस तरह से एक सर्वे का हमारे पास आ जाता है।
फिर आप उनको अप्रोच करते हैं?
उसके बाद अप्रोच करते हैं, हम लोग करते हैं जनरली वहाँ के जो इन्फ्लुएंशियल पर्सन, जो भी पर्सन उनके थे।
तो ये 10 लोगों को आप अप्रोच करेंगे, कितने लोग आएंगे ट्रेनिंग के लिए?
देखिए हम लोग जनरली सर्वे जो करते हैं एक गांव में मिनिमम 100 करते हैं।
100 को अगर आप अप्रोच करेंगे, कितने लोग ट्रेनिंग के लिए आएंगे?
तो उसमें लगभग 30%।
बट व्हाट आई अंडरस्टैंड कि ज़्यादा लोग आते हैं जितना आपका ट्रेनिंग है उसके हिसाब से डिमांड ज़्यादा है, बहुत ज़्यादा
आते हैं हम लोग करते हैं।
तो फिर आप 100 को अप्रोच क्यों कर रहे हैं? जस्ट फॉर
नहीं,
फर्स्ट कम फर्स्ट सर्व।
हाँ, मिनिमम हम लोग 100 करते हैं, और जब एक बार वहाँ शुरू हो जाता है तब एक लाइन हमारा वहाँ बेस तैयार हो गया, और उसके बाद फिर वो कंटिन्यूअस लोग आते रहते हैं, फ्लो होते रहते हैं।
तो अभी अब सर्वे नहीं कर रहे हैं,
नहीं, सर्वे हम लोग किए हैं, बहुत सारे गाँव में किए हैं,
बट करेंटली आर यू डूइंग अ सर्वे?
नहीं अभी उसका जरूरत नहीं पड़ रहा है, इसलिए कि सर्वे ऑलरेडी हम लोग कर चुके हैं। गांव में हमारा सेंटर है, ब्लॉक में सेंटर है, पंचायत में है, तो अब वहाँ इस तरह से हम लोगों का बन गया है कि लोग अपने आते रहते हैं वहाँ पर।
आपकी तो ये प्रोसेस बताएं, अगर नया सेंटर कहीं
हाँ,
खोलना है तब
करें।
लेकिन हमारा तो अब नया कोई सेंटर नहीं है, हमारा
हाँ।
तो एग्जिस्टिंग है जिसको लोग जानते हैं, पीपल
अभी 15 ब्लॉक में हम लोग 15-16 ब्लॉक में काम कर रहे हैं, तो वहाँ पर लोग आ रहे हैं। वहाँ पर एक बना हुआ है कि भाई जैसे सागरी है वो ये काम कर रही है, तो लोग अपने आप आ रहे हैं, और जो हमारे यहाँ से ट्रेनिंग लेके जाते हैं वही एडवोकेसी का काम करते हैं।
ये आपने बताया था कि जो ट्रेनिंग लेके जाते हैं वही बोलते हैं, फिर उनके
हाँ।
जान पहचान के लोग ही आते
आते हैं। यहाँ भी वही हाल है, हमारे यहाँ भी हम लोग कभी भी पेपर में या पम्पलेट नहीं देते हैं, जो हमारे यहाँ से पढ़ के जाते हैं वही एक पढ़ के गए, वो कम से कम 8-10 पेज के।
तो कितना टाइम लगता है एक यदि कोई आए और कहे मुझे ट्रेनिंग करना है, तो कितना टाइम लगता है वो ट्रेनिंग के लिए?
ट्रेनिंग का अलग अलग जो ट्रेड हमारा है उसके ऊपर डिपेंड है, तो मिनिमम है उसका 3.5 मंथ हाँ, 3.5, और फिर डिपेंड करता है IT का है, तो उसमें 7 महीने का है, इलेक्ट्रिकल टेक्नीशियन है तो 4 महीने का है, वो डिपेंड कर रहा है कि किस तरह का ट्रेनिंग करता है, लेकिन 3.5 महीने के ऊपर ही है उसे।
तो इसमें जो आपका जो तरीका है उसमें तो या तो फेवरेट लोग होंगे उनको पेड़ मान लीजिए उतना ज़्यादा।
हाँ, ये थोड़ा होता है, लेकिन है क्या ठीक है, फर्स्ट पेज में मुखिया के लोग आते हैं, लेकिन उसके बाद जो है हमारा तुरंत दूसरा हम बैच शुरू कर देते हैं, वहाँ हमारा एक जगह पर कम से कम 2-3 बैच कंटिन्यूअस चलता है, तो फिर और भी लोग आ जाते हैं। एक अगर फैशन डिजाइनिंग का हम लोग कर रहे हैं, वहीं पर ब्यूटिशियन का भी शुरू कर दिए गर्ल्स के लिए, प्लम्बर का अगर कर रहे हैं तो इलेक्ट्रिकल का भी करती है।
ये क्या कोई लिस्ट है क्या कौन से कोर्स करा गए हैं उसका?
हाँ,
बैक आए हैं
कल भी हम
अच्छा हाँ कल आप दिखाए थे ना।
लिस्ट हम दे भी देंगे।
And we have also done some very experimental courses,
हाँ,
right? Like for example, this electrician course was there. What they have done is have an all-girls batch of electrician, which was
ये ऑल इंडिया में हम डेवलप कर रहे हैं।
and that turned out to be very successful.
वो आपने ही डिसाइड किया ना?
हाँ।
उसमें कोई सरकार से
नहीं।
कुछ
तो
okay,
हमारे
so we can maybe keep in
Which has been
like
like
that.
recommended in other states, I think.
हाँ, वो कर रहे हैं लोग कि भाई पटना जैसे इस तरह का कर रही है, आप लोग भी करें।
Okay, so that's
अभी एक चीज़ और हम लोग करने जा रहे हैं नया डिबेट शुरू करेंगे, बात हमारी चल रही है वो है ट्रांसजेंडर के लिए, तो उनको ट्रेनिंग हम लोग कराएंगे। तो पटना सिटी में एक एरिया है जहाँ पर इन लोग का बड़ा क्लस्टर है, तो उनके यहाँ हम लोग कराएंगे। हो सकता है कि 1 महीना में हम लोग शुरू कर दें।
कौन सा ट्रेनिंग देंगे उनको?
देखिए वहाँ पर हम लोगों ने बात किया था उनसे, तो कटिंग ट्रेनिंग और ब्यूटिशियन, ये 2 उन लोगों का डिमांड था, तो इसी दोनों को हम लोग करवाएंगे। और अभी ऑल इंडिया में कहीं पर भी एकदम स्पेसिफाइड इस तरह का नहीं है। आते हैं लोग, 1 आते हैं 2 आते हैं, लेकिन हम लोग बिल्कुल उनके लिए ही करेंगे।
ब्यूटिशियन और क्या?
टेलर। हाँ, टेलर का जो ट्रेनिंग है उससे होता क्या है कि लड़कियां घर से बाहर आती हैं, वो सभी का नीड है। आज
ये पर्टिकुलर किस मिनिस्ट्री के स्कीम में है?
मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ स्किल डेवलपमेंट एंड एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप।
और दिस कन्फाइन ओनली टू रूरल एरियाज?
नहीं, सारा का सारा उन्हीं, मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ स्किल MSD।
और ये डेटा है कितना हो गया है बिहार में?
क्या कितना हो गया?
बिहार में कितना कवरेज हुआ है? कितने डिस्ट्रिक्ट का 36 डिस्ट्रिक्ट में?
अभी 21 डिस्ट्रिक्ट में JSS चल रही है पूरे बिहार में, 21 डिस्ट्रिक्ट। इन लोगों का प्लानिंग है कि हर डिस्ट्रिक्ट में एक जनसेक्शन होना चाहिए। देखते हैं हम लोग कब तक करते हैं, लेकिन 21 डिस्ट्रिक्ट में भी है। एक चीज़ और भी हम लोग देखे हैं कि उनका जो कोर्स करिकुलम है और हम लोग जो कराते हैं, दोनों में थोड़ा सा अंतर है। उनका लेवल बहुत नीचे है, कम है मिनिस्ट्री का जो है, मिनिस्ट्री का जो करिकुलम है।
अच्छा, तो आप उसको फॉलो नहीं कर सकते?
उतना तो करते हैं, उससे हम लोग बहुत ज़्यादा करते हैं।
So that means that there is scope for.
हाँ, क्योंकि अगर खाली हम उतना बताएंगे तो स्टूडेंट नहीं आएंगे। देखिए इन लोग कोर्स जो बना रहे थे वो पूरे इंडिया के देखते हुए बना रहे हैं। मान लिया कि ब्यूटिशियन का एक कोर्स है, तो एक ट्रेड उन लोगों ने रखा है नेल पेंट का। हमारे यहाँ पटना में उसका डिमांड बहुत ठीक है, लेकिन कम है। अगर हम ब्यूटिशियन में नेल पेंट अलग से जोड़ के बता देते हैं तो लोगों को थोड़ा सा ज़्यादा बेनिफिट है। नेल आर्ट,
हाँ,
तो उसका पटना में उतना डिमांड नहीं है, कम है नेल आर्ट। वो भी हम लोग अलग से करवा देते हैं। हेयर कटिंग जो है वो अलग कोर्स है। हम लोग हेयर कटिंग, हमारा जो कोर्स है उसमें हम लोग साथ में करवाते हैं।
तो आप फिजिकल ट्रेनिंग कहाँ देते हैं? इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है?
हाँ, पूरा है।
कहाँ?
एक तो यहाँ है हमारा इसी में,
ऐसे नहीं।
नहीं आदरी है ही।
अच्छा,
यहाँ हमारा एक बिल्डिंग और बगल में लिया हुआ है, तो उसमें हमारा ट्रेनिंग सेंटर है।
उस डेटा में इकोनॉमिक स्टेटस भी है?
स्टेटस
नहीं।
नहीं, वो economic status है।
सिर्फ नाम लेते हैं, उनका एज लेते हैं,
थोड़ा सा एक चीज़ ले लेते हैं,
religion,
उसका सिर्फ APL है कि BPL, ये हम लोग ले लेते हैं।
वो फॉर्मेट सेंटर से ही आता है कि ये
हाँ, उस सेंटर से फॉर्मेट है, तो उसमें है कि मिनिमम या उनका जो फैमिली इनकम है वो कितना है, बस उसी के आधार पर वो APL और BPL वही दोनों खाली मांगते हैं कि कितना APL है, कितना BPL।
हमारे कार्य आगे है, आज देखिए
or company.
quite a few. You have met this old man also. There's always something, a little bit, 1% also assimilated here. That's good enough. Cumulative effect.
Yes, amazing.
So they said, oh,
Yeah, we should also. ठीक है, संदीप जी, हम लोग फिर और
हाँ,
आपके पास
आपके साथ भी एक हम तो चले जाएंगे फिर नेक्स्ट वीक आपके साथ एक जूम कॉल।
हाँ बिल्कुल बिल्कुल, और बड़ा अच्छा लगेगा हमें यहाँ कि गाँव में भी सेंटर हमारा चल रहा है और तो बढ़िया सेंटर चल रहा है। कभी दिल्ली से भी हमारे यहाँ मॉनिटरिंग जो करते हैं, हम लोग तो अपना करते ही हैं, लेकिन दिल्ली से अचानक फोन आ जाएगा, टाइम हम लोग भेज देते हैं कितने बजे से हमारा कौन सा क्लास चल रहा है, अचानक सुबह 9 बजे फ़ोन आ गया, अरे यहाँ क्लास चल रहा है, आप वीडियो करके कॉल करके दिखाइए।
अगली बार जब आएंगे तो आप जाएंगे आपके सेंटर में।
हाँ बिल्कुल,
सेंटर में
पटना में ही एक दो सेंटर हमारा है जो बिल्कुल माइनॉरिटी सेंटर है, उसे लड़कियाँ गई।
थैंक यू सर।